Robb Stark drew a ragged breath in the darkness, his body aching from wounds he could scarcely recall receiving. The air was thick with the metallic stench of blood, and for one terrifying instant he could not remember where he was. Light flickered somewhere to his left, torchlight, perhaps, and he tried to focus on it, tried to orient himself in this horrible carnage. Memories clawed at him, the red wedding, the feast at the twins. Betrayal. His mother's screams. The Freys and the Boltons turning on them. The unthinkable had happened, the king in the north had been struck down. But he was not dead. Not yet. The pain in his side was a testament to that, though it felt as though a dire wolf was gnawing at his ribs. His vision swam, and for a time he thought he must be dreaming. Men stepped over him with swords raised, caked in blood. He saw corpses, the dead scattered around like discarded marionettes. The tapestry of betrayal covered the floor in red. Somewhere, through the veil of agony, he sensed he was lying on cold stone. The great hall of the twins, that must be it. Or a corridor. It was difficult to tell. Gradually, pieces of the night returned. He remembered the music, the ominous strings of the Rains of Castamere morphing into something else. A coded sign to the conspirators. He remembered how Walder Frey's smug grin had twisted into something rancid, how Roose Bolton had moved without warning. His mother, Catelyn Stark, her wild eyes as she tried to barter for his life. Then the rush of men in mail, drawing steel. A dagger to his side. The searing pain. After that, everything was white noise and red haze. He forced himself to move, to see if he could crawl somewhere, anywhere safe. The first shift of his limbs sent a lightning bolt of agony through his torso, nearly causing him to black out again. Robb clamped his teeth together, not daring to cry out. If the Freys knew he still lived, they would finish what they started. His breath was shallow, ragged with the taste of blood, but each moment he survived was another chance. A chance for what, he did not know. Escape? Revenge? This was the end of his rebellion. The king in the north had lost. A part of him wanted to close his eyes and let the darkness take him. Yet that unyielding Stark stubbornness, the iron in his blood, refused to let him die on this cold stone in the fortress of his enemies. With one trembling hand, he grasped the corner of a toppled table leg. Its edge was splintered, but it supported enough of his weight to let him drag his body forward. Every inch was torment, but he persisted. The hall was emptying now, or at least, fewer footsteps echoed on the flagstones. Most of the men had gone in pursuit of other Starks, or had fled to gather the spoils. So long as no one noticed him, no one recognized his face, perhaps he could find a corridor unguarded. Gasping, he pulled himself through a doorway. The corridor beyond was thick with shadows and reeked of spilled wine. A single sconce guttered on the wall, throwing strange patterns on the stones. Robb collapsed against the wall, blood trickling from his side. He tore at what remained of his tunic and pressed the cloth to his wound, hoping to staunch the bleeding. His entire being trembled, yet the shock of the cool air helped keep him conscious. A voice drifted closer. "They're all dead," someone spat. The young wolf was stabbed a half-dozen times. "If he isn't dead yet, he's no better than." The words trailed away as the speaker moved on. Robb held his breath, praying to the old gods that they would not come searching this hallway. Finally, the voices faded. Silent tears burned at the corners of his eyes as he thought of his mother. Had she truly fallen, or had they taken her captive? His thoughts flickered through the nightmare, remembering the moment she had seized the Frey girl and demanded mercy. But mercy had never come, not from Walder Frey, not from Roose Bolton, not from the Lannisters either. Strength drained from him with every breath, but he refused to succumb. With halting steps, he forced himself upright. He pressed his forearm against the wound, each movement a fresh torment, and staggered down the corridor. The twins was a maze of halls and stairways, but he vaguely recalled the stables lying in an outer courtyard. If he could get outside, find a horse, some miracle. Perhaps he could make it out. For what purpose, the rational part of his mind asked, but he shoved that thought aside. All that mattered was living. A king might die, but Robb Stark did not intend to. Each corridor he passed was a trial by fire, each turn a test of his desperation. He heard laughter echoing from behind closed doors, the bitter triumph of traitors. Footsteps patrolled the main passages, so he slipped into narrower side corridors, not caring if they led him astray. At times he had to cling to the walls to stay upright. His breathing came in shallow gasps, and still the blood leaked through his improvised bandage. The old gods must have guided him, for somehow he found himself staring at a small, unguarded postern door. By then, his legs were so weak that he collapsed, shoulders banging against the timbers. He fumbled with the latch, expecting it to be locked, but it shifted with a scraping groan. Outside lay darkness illuminated by moonlight, a courtyard deserted by the chaos of the night. A few torches guttered by the stable entrance. No guards in sight. He mustered what remained of his will and crawled forward. The moon was high and silver, revealing the overturned wagons, the scattered weapons, the corpses. He saw no immediate threat, so he forced himself to stand, leaning heavily on a broken shaft of a spear. The stable looked promising. In the chaos, few would have taken the time to stable their own horses. There might still be mounts inside. He stumbled, nearly falling face-first into the mud, but caught himself. A single step, then another. The sky above seemed impossibly large. The stable was still and reeked of straw and dung. Indeed, there were horses. Most of them panicked, eyes rolling white with fear. They had heard the noises of the massacre, the screams and the clang of steel. Robb forced himself onward, trying to quiet his ragged breathing. Even so, a few horses skittered away from his approach. He spied a sturdy bay mare in one of the far stalls, her eyes wide but calmer than the rest. He inched closer, murmuring softly, though the sound made him cough. The horse flicked her ears, but did not shy away. He reached for a bridle hanging on a peg, his fingers barely functioning, and attempted to secure it. Every movement was a battle. His limbs trembled with exhaustion and blood loss. He closed his eyes, swallowing back dizziness. If he did not hurry, men would come, and they would finish him. Slowly, methodically, he managed to slip the bridle over the mare's head and secure the reins. He wasn't sure he had the strength to mount, but if he did not, he was a dead man. Summoning the last scraps of energy, he grasped the edge of the stall and hurled his good leg over the saddle. Pain spiked through his ribs, and for a moment his sight went black. He sagged against the horse's neck, clinging like a man on a sinking ship, but he was astride, stabbing his heels into her flank, gently, for his battered body could do little else. He guided the mare toward the stable door. She responded with an anxious whicker but obeyed, stepping gingerly over a broken trough. When he emerged into the courtyard, he heard a shout from the rampart. He looked up and saw torches winking in the gloom. A soldier's voice, "Stop!" Then an arrow whizzed through the night. The horse startled, rearing, but Robb kept a tenuous grip on the reins. He kicked, leaning low across her neck, ignoring the searing of his wound. The mare bolted. Thundering hooves pounded the dirt as they raced across the open yard. He ducked another arrow, praying to the old gods for cover. The postern gate was closed, but not fully barred. It stood slightly ajar, as if someone had neglected it in the frenzy. Another arrow cracked off the stone archway, sending sparks. The mare charged through the gate. Suddenly they were outside the walls, galloping into the open countryside. Shouts echoed in the distance, but for the moment, Robb had slipped through. The night air rushed at him, cold and bracing, and with it came a sense of staggering relief. He was not safe, not truly, but he was no longer trapped within the twins. Blood seeped down his side, spattering on the horse's flank. His grip slackened, and it was all he could do to keep himself upright. Darkness tugged at the edges of his vision, but he gritted his teeth, commanding himself to stay conscious. North, he thought. I must go north. To gray wind, to the remnants of his army, whoever might still live. But the terrible truth was that most of his men were likely slaughtered or in flight. All of them had believed that the Freys were their allies. Now that hope was dust. Somehow the mare kept galloping as if she understood how dire her rider's straits were. Under the moonlit sky, they sped across fields, fording a small stream and pushing onward until Robb could ride no further. Finally, he guided her into a patch of woodland. Her flanks were heaving, her nostrils flared. Robb slid from the saddle and fell to the ground, curling around the agony in his ribs. The night pressed in close. He forced himself to tear more cloth from his tunic and bind the wound, though it was a crude effort. Through the haze of pain, he heard the mare grazing on the damp grass. Dawn was distant and he doubted he could stay awake until then. But survive he did, though the hours were torture. Time lost meaning, overshadowed by the throbbing in his side and the chill creeping through his blood. Morning light found him delirious with fever, slumped against a tree trunk. The mare stood quietly nearby, occasionally cropping at leaves. His lips were cracked with thirst, but he lacked the strength to fetch water. When he tried to rise, his vision swam and he collapsed. Whether it was an hour or half a day later, he never knew, but at some point he sensed movement in the forest. Instinct told him to call out, but caution held him silent. He feared the figures approaching might be fry hunters. Through a blur, he saw shapes, men on foot, lightly armed. He tried to reach for his sword, only to realize he had lost it back in the twins. Helpless, he could only wait. They approached with tense wariness, but one of them, an older man with streaks of gray in his beard, knelt beside Robb. The man touched his brow, cursed under his breath, and motioned to the others. Carefully, they hoisted Robb, murmuring that they must hurry if he was to be saved. Fading in and out of consciousness, Robb could not make sense of their words. Something about the Starks, something about revenge. Then darkness claimed him. He awoke some time later in a small wooden hut, a single room warmed by a fire in the hearth. His side was bound with fresh bandages that reeked of healing herbs. His head throbbed, and he couldn't tell if the men who saved him were enemies or allies. But none made a move to harm him. The older man introduced himself as Hal Malin, once sworn to House Stark as a guard in Winterfell. Hal had recognized the king in the north, battered and near death, and had no intention of turning him over to the Freys. Alongside him were a handful of other Northmen who had managed to evade the slaughter, small folk mostly, but loyal. They had fled south, ironically, hoping to slip through the Riverlands unnoticed. They never expected to stumble upon their liege lord near the brink of death. Robb's fever lingered, but over the next days he slowly recovered. He asked after his mother, after his army, but Hal had scarce news beyond the rumors of a total rout. Catelyn Stark was rumored dead. The young queen, Jane Westerling, whereabouts unknown. Most of the banners had either scattered or been captured. The sole silver lining was that the Freys apparently believed Robb dead. That gave them a small measure of safety, but only a small one. House Bolton had claimed the North in the name of the Iron Throne, and Walder Frey would be eager to prove the kill if any doubted. The king in the north was now a fugitive, a dead man walking, with fewer than a dozen loyal survivors at his side. Robb's first impulse was vengeance. He wanted to ride back to the twins, set them aflame, avenge his mother. But he had neither the men nor the resources to accomplish it. Some of Hal's company insisted that they sneak back north of the Neck, gather any loyal bannermen they could find. But the Boltons ruled from Winterfell, and the Greyjoys still plagued the western coasts. The north was not safe. Others suggested heading east or south, perhaps to the Vale. Maybe the Knights of the Vale would shelter him. But Lady Lisa Arryn was no friend to the Starks, and the Vale's gates were closed to all but their own. Despair threatened to consume him. In quiet moments, Robb felt the overwhelming guilt of having led his people to a gruesome end. He had failed to protect his mother, had broken his oath to the Freys by marrying Jane, and for that they had butchered his men. In those dark hours, Hal Malin spoke to him in hushed tones by the fire, reminding him of the duty he still bore. The North might be beaten and scattered, but it was not lost forever. If Robb Stark lived, there was hope. He had to gather strength and seek allies. To do that, he must leave the Riverlands behind. And so, painfully, Robb conceded that flight was the best option. Within a fortnight, when he could walk steadily and ride without keeling over, they set out. A ragtag band of survivors, traveling mostly at night, using back roads and hidden paths. They disguised themselves as common travelers, though it was difficult to hide Robb's height, his air of command. They journeyed east, away from the Freys, away from the ruin of the Red Wedding. Skirmishing only when absolutely necessary, they lost 2 men to roaming bandits but pressed on. Every day, Robb's wounds knitted a bit more, though his heart remained scarred. He lived, but he felt he was only half a man without his mother, without Grey Wind, without his army. Winter was coming, he reminded himself. The Starks have always known that. Survive now, gather strength. The chance for justice would come in time. It had to. They spent a month in near-constant flight. The Riverlands were full of Lannister soldiers and Frey men-at-arms. Twice, they narrowly avoided capture. Once, they rode deep into a marsh at dusk, hiding until the patrol passed. Robb's face was lined with exhaustion and grim resolve. Still, Hal urged him onward. They traded some of their meager possessions for food, bartering with suspicious farmers, always mindful of betrayal. Rumors filtered to them. About the ascendant Lannisters, about the Tyrells consolidating their hold in the Reach, about King's Landing grown decadent under the boy King Tommen. But one rumor in particular caught Robb's attention like a spark in dry tinder. Daenerys Targaryen lived and had dragons. 3 of them, if the tales were true. She was said to be in Essos, forging an army out of freed slaves. Some declared she was the rightful queen, daughter of the Mad King, come to reclaim the Iron Throne. Others thought her no more than a silver-haired pretender, a curiosity from across the narrow sea. Regardless of whether the rumors were true or false, the notion seized Robb's imagination. He knew what dragons could mean if they were real. The ultimate weapon, a power that could challenge the might of the Lannisters and all the treacherous houses that served them. But more than that, the Targaryen name carried the promise of turning the 7 kingdoms upside down. A broken, defeated king in the north could not hope to stand alone. But perhaps, if he found an alliance with the Dragon Queen, there might be a chance to reclaim what had been lost. Others in his group balked at the idea. Why trust a Targaryen? Hadn't the Mad King burned the North's fields, demanded fealty at sword point? But Robb reasoned that times had changed. If Daenerys truly cared for freeing slaves and punishing injustice, then she might be sympathetic to the Northern cause. And if, by some miracle, the rumors of dragons were true, Robb Stark wanted no part in opposing them. Far better to befriend the mother of dragons than fight her. So he resolved to sail east and seek Daenerys Targaryen in Essos. It was a mad plan, one that would take them across the sea, far from the land they had bled for. But the alternative was to skulk in the shadows of Westeros, waiting to be hunted down. If the Freys or Boltons discovered his survival, they would spare no expense to capture him. In Essos, at least, he might find the time and safety to gather his thoughts and approach Daenerys. It took weeks of travel to reach a safe port on the eastern coast. They had to lie, cheat, and occasionally bribe their way past suspicious gatekeepers. Finally, in the port city of Saltcliffe, occupied partially by the Ironborn, but chaos reigned enough for them to slip through, they found a Braavosi ship willing to take passengers no questions asked, for the right price. They pooled their coin, even selling the mare that had saved Robb's life, though it tore at him to part with her. Yet they had no other choice. Under assumed names, they boarded the Braavosi cog and sailed across the narrow sea, leaving Westeros behind. The crossing was mercifully uneventful, though Robb was plagued by nightmares of the Red Wedding. Visions of his mother's final scream haunted him, and more than once he woke in a sweat, clutching at his bandaged side. Hal and the others gave him space, but their presence was a comfort of sorts. At least he was not alone, not entirely. During the days, he stared out at the endless waters, brooding on what he might say to the Targaryen queen if ever he reached her. How do you appeal to a dragon? With humility? With pride? He had no illusions that he could demand anything. He was a king without a kingdom, a wolf without a pack. Eventually, they reached Pentos, the great city of domes and towers. The opulence stunned them, so different from the rough, war-torn landscape of Westeros. Pentos was awash in color and trade, in silks and spices. But it was also rife with intrigue and slaves, though nominally the city-state claimed to have abolished slavery. Robb and his companions found lodging in a cheap tavern, hoping to gather more reliable news of Daenerys Targaryen's whereabouts. The rumor mills buzzed. She had sacked Astapor, freed the Unsullied, and conquered Yunkai, then Meereen. She was in Meereen now, ruling as queen. So the stories claimed. And yes, the dragons were real, growing larger with each passing day. To journey from Pentos to Meereen was no small feat. Essos was vast, and the lands in between were dangerous, rife with slavers and outlaws. Even so, Robb refused to be deterred. If Daenerys was building her own kingdom in Meereen, that was where he must go. Gathering supplies and hiring a handful of sellswords for protection, they set out. Their Braavosi coin was dwindling, but Hal negotiated cleverly. A few of the sellswords recognized the fervor in the tall, broad-shouldered Westerosi man. They did not know he was Robb Stark, but they suspected he was some noble seeking the Dragon Queen's favor. A man with a cause, if not a purse. Their journey took them through the flat grasslands of the Dothraki Sea, skirting the territories of fearsome horse lords. Several times, scouts reported sightings of Dothraki raiders. Robb's band had to move swiftly and stealthily to avoid a confrontation they would never survive. In the evenings, they huddled around small fires, cooking meager fare, always with one eye on the horizon. The days were punishing, but something about the wide open spaces, the sense of vast possibility, stirred Robb's spirit. He was far from the north, far from the heartbreak that had nearly destroyed him. Perhaps across these distant plains lay a second chance. Weeks blurred into months. They lost 2 of their sellswords to an ambush by slavers, but Robb led the desperate counterattack with a ferocity that startled his companions. The memory of betrayal, of the Red Wedding, fueled a cold anger in him, a burning desire to protect those who still followed him. Eventually, word reached them that Daenerys Targaryen was still in Meereen, consolidating her power, forging alliances, dealing with internal rebellions. If any travelers sought her throne, they would not be turned away, though they might be met with suspicion. At last, the high walls of Meereen rose from the scorching plain. Its proud pyramids soared into the sky, banners fluttering in the dry wind. Surrounding the city were makeshift camps, traders, refugees, freedmen, all gathered under the uncertain shadow of the Dragon Queen's rule. Robb and his band worked their way through the throng. Slaves called out blessings to Daenerys, while wealthy merchants cursed her name for disrupting the slave trade. The tension hung thick in the air. Through it all, the brazen beasts, masked enforcers loyal to the queen, patrolled in organized ranks. Robb's approach to the city gates was tense. Hal had suggested they claim to be merchants, but Robb knew they needed an audience with the queen. Hiding his identity forever would not serve. So he presented himself as a Westerosi knight seeking audience with Daenerys. The guards, suspicious, escorted them inside. They were told to remain in a barracks-like building until summoned. Days passed and frustration grew. Yet at length, a messenger arrived, instructing Robb and his entourage to stand before the court of Queen Daenerys Targaryen. He took care in preparing himself, mindful that appearances mattered, even if he had little in the way of finery. His once golden brown hair was longer now, and his face was leaner, etched with hardship. But his posture was proud as he entered the grand hall, flanked by Hal and the remaining loyalists. Guards lined the walls, and at the far end, seated upon a throne of polished bronze, was Daenerys Stormborn. Her hair was a cascade of silver white, braided in a style reminiscent of the Dothraki. She wore flowing silks of deep blue, embroidered with dragons in silver thread. At her side stood trusted advisors. A tall, bald man in rich robes, a knight with a bare sigil on his breastplate, and others. A hush fell as Robb approached. Daenerys regarded him with curious violet eyes. She radiated an aura of command, yet there was a warmth there too. He bent the knee. Whatever else he was not so proud as to dismiss her sovereignty in her own realm. She rose, stepping closer, studying him. He felt the weight of her gaze. "Who are you?" Daenerys asked in a clear, ringing voice. "And what do you seek in Meereen?" Robb straightened. He did not flinch or falter. "My name is Robb Stark," he said. The quiet in the hall became absolute. The rumors of the Red Wedding had traveled far, and many believed the young wolf dead. "I was king in the north before betrayal cost me my mother, my men, and my birthright. I come seeking alliance, your grace." Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Her advisors exchanged glances. Daenerys narrowed her eyes, weighing his words, perhaps recalling her own betrayals and losses. "I have heard the tales of your rebellion, King Robb," she said slowly. "Some said you died in a massacre at the Twins." "I almost did," he replied. "But I survived. My house is shattered, my people scattered. Yet our cause remains just. We were betrayed by the Lannisters, the Boltons, the Freys. They serve the Iron Throne now, the same throne that your father once claimed. I ask not for your pity, only for the chance to speak with you, and perhaps earn your trust." She studied him with those unwavering violet eyes. "I will not deny that an alliance with a Stark could prove useful, especially one who harbors no love for the Lannisters. But you must understand. I have my own war here, my own city to rule, and I seek to break the wheel that has ground the common people into dust. If you only aim to reclaim your crown, you may find me less receptive." The clang of a distant gong reverberated in the hall, signifying some trouble in the city. Yet Daenerys did not break her focus on Robb. He lowered his gaze, acknowledging the severity of her stance. I do not come to claim dominion over your people. My father was Ned Stark, who believed in justice and honor. I was raised to protect the innocent. What I want is justice for my family, and to free my homeland from the traitors who now hold it. But I have learned the cost of war. I know what it means to fail my people. Let me prove my worth. Give me a chance to show you that the North stands for more than just vengeance. She inclined her head slightly, neither accepting nor denying his plea. Stay in Meereen as my guest, she declared to him and to the hall. I will decide in time if you and I might walk the same path. Thus began Robb Stark's new life in Meereen. He was given quarters within the city, modest rooms in a refurbished noble's estate. His men shared a barracks not far away. Daenerys allowed him into her presence on occasion, but her trust was guarded. Robb suspected her advisors counseled caution, especially the knight Ser Barristan Selmy, who had once served the Targaryens in Westeros, and Jorah Mormont, a man exiled from the north under Ned Stark's rulings. The latter regarded Robb with a mixture of curiosity and residual shame. Mormont had been banished for selling poachers into slavery, an act Ned Stark could not forgive. Weeks passed. Robb learned of Daenerys' struggles to maintain order in Meereen, to keep the Sons of the Harpy at bay. He offered his sword to help quell the insurgency, leading small groups of unsullied and local volunteers to patrol the city's warrens. He even took a wound defending one of the Queen's loyal officers. Each action, every earnest gesture, built a slow bridge of respect. Daenerys saw that Robb truly cared for the people, that he did not hesitate to risk himself. Rumors of his valor spread through the streets. Some whispered that the wolf served the dragon. Yet the real turning point came when one of her dragons, Drogon, began terrorizing the outskirts of the city. The dragons were growing rapidly, and Drogon, the largest and fiercest, had become increasingly uncontrollable. In an attempt to spare the population, Daenerys had chained Rhaegal and Viserion, but Drogon escaped confinement and would not return. Hunters reported sightings near the coastal cliffs, where flocks of sheep had been slaughtered and once, tragically, a young goat herd. The city seethed with fear and anger, while Daenerys wrestled with guilt and helplessness. One evening, word reached the palace that Drogon had been spotted high in the crags north of Meereen. The Queen's small council urged her to remain within the city, to avoid risking herself in an attempt to subdue the dragon. But Robb, seeing the toll it took on Daenerys to have her child, her greatest weapon, estranged and dangerous, stepped forward. Allow me to help you find him, he said quietly. I do not pretend to command dragons, but I have hunted direwolves in the Wolfswood. I know how to track beasts and approach them quietly. Daenerys hesitated. Drogon is no mere beast, Robb Stark. He is fire made flesh. He will kill you if you anger him. I understand, but do you not need to see him with your own eyes? To try to speak to him? Calm him? If you go alone, your council will fear for your life. If I go alone, I cannot hope to control him. But if we go together, perhaps we can restore the bond you share. Or, at the very least, ensure no more innocent lives are lost. Ser Barristan argued caution, but Jorah, unexpectedly, sided with Robb, recalling how Daenerys had risked herself for her dragons before. The Queen herself, torn, finally decided to go, for she could not bear to let Drogon rampage unchecked. She gathered a small escort, and Robb prepared for the journey with methodical precision, ensuring they had ropes, grappling hooks, and protective leathers, though he doubted any hide could truly shield them from dragonfire. They set out at dawn, traveling a winding path through the rocky foothills to the north. Even from a distance, they could see the black shape circling the heights, wings blotting out the sun. As they ascended the crags, the party moved slowly. Daenerys wore her riding leathers and carried a short whip, though she looked more anxious than fierce. The wind whipped her silver hair about her shoulders. Robb stayed close, a sword at his belt, though he felt foolish thinking a blade might do anything against a dragon. Yet he also carried a stout spear of hardened steel, a desperation measure should Drogon attack. Near mid-morning, they caught sight of the great beast. Drogon perched on a ledge of stone, devouring the carcass of a mountain goat. His scales were black as midnight, horns and spines glinting bronze in the sunlight. Smoke curled from his nostrils as he tore flesh from bone. Daenerys motioned for the others to stay back, then took a few cautious steps forward. Robb followed at her side, scanning the terrain. It felt as though they were approaching a living, breathing inferno. Drogon lifted his head, yellow eyes fixing on them. His pupils narrowed to slits. Daenerys called out in High Valyrian, her voice echoing off the rocky walls. She urged Drogon to be calm, to remember her. The dragon hissed, rustling its massive wings. Robb swallowed hard, stepping behind Daenerys. He could feel the heat emanating from Drogon's body, see the frills along his neck rise in warning. Then, in an explosion of movement, Drogon roared, unleashing a jet of flame that scorched the air. Daenerys barely ducked, her cheeks blanched with terror and heartbreak. She cried out to him again, but Drogon only roared louder, as if in challenge. Robb could see that fear was weakening Daenerys' resolve. He stepped forward, heart-hammering, and planted the butt of his spear in the ground. Slowly, methodically, he removed his cloak and set it aside, exposing the scars on his side where he'd been stabbed at the twins. He met the dragon's eyes. Drogon snarled, showing teeth the length of daggers. It was madness, but Robb recalled how he once soothed gray wind on the battlefield, how his dire wolf responded to calm confidence rather than aggression. This was no dire wolf, but if Drogon sensed only fear and hostility, he would never be tamed. He spoke softly, though his words were half nonsense, a low murmur of reassurance and acknowledgement of Drogon's power. The dragon beat his wings, stirring dust and loose rock in a violent gust. Daenerys reached out, calling Drogon's name again. For an instant, Robb thought the beast would strike and incinerate them both. But something in their combined presence held Drogon at bay. Robb inched forward, just close enough that he could feel the scorching heat radiating off Drogon's black scales. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he forced himself to stay, to show no sudden movements. Drogon's great yellow eye swiveled to Robb, then to Daenerys. A rumble like distant thunder emanated from his chest. Slowly, painfully, Daenerys stretched out a hand, palm open. Robb did the same, though his heart pounded so hard he feared it might burst. Drogon hissed, exhaled a plume of smoke, then lowered his head, nostrils flaring. The moment was fragile, poised on the edge of disaster. Yet no fire came. The dragon allowed their hands to rest lightly on his snout, his scales hot and rough to the touch. A cascade of relief and awe coursed through Robb. He could sense the vast power in Drogon's body, the muscles taut with potential energy. Daenerys' eyes glistened, her expression filled with wonder and sorrow. She crooned a string of Valyrian words. Drogon shuddered, folding his wings partially against his sides. It was not submission exactly, but a tentative acceptance. Moments passed, each breath a minor miracle. They dared to guide Drogon off the ledge to a flatter expanse, coaxing him with soothing voices. The rest of their escort watched from a distance, transfixed. Daenerys stroked Drogon's neck, speaking to him in quiet, urgent tones. She told him of her love, of her sorrow at chaining the others, of her hope that they could remain united. Robb stood by, silent, letting her words fill the space. Yet Drogon's gaze drifted to Robb, almost curious. An ancient intelligence seemed to simmer behind those reptilian eyes. In a burst of impetuous courage, Daenerys moved to mount Drogon as she once had in the fighting pits. Robb's breath caught in his throat, fearing the dragon might rebel. But this time, Drogon tolerated her weight. He snorted, scraping a claw across the stone, but did not throw her off. She beckoned to Robb, who stared in utter astonishment. Mount the dragon as well? That was unthinkable. Yet her expression was resolute, and Drogon had not immediately burned them to cinders. With trembling caution, Robb climbed onto Drogon's back, positioning himself just behind Daenerys. The dragon rumbled, shaking them. For an instant, Robb envisioned plummeting off the edge of the cliff. Then, with a powerful lunge, Drogon launched himself into the sky. The force nearly tore Robb free, but he clung to the ridges of the dragon's scales, arms around Daenerys' waist. The wind whipped his hair, the ground dropping away beneath them. Terror roared with exhilaration as Drogon soared higher, wings beating the air with thunderous whooshes. Daenerys guided Drogon as best she could, though it was less a matter of control than suggestion. They circled above the crags, the view dizzying. Robb had never felt anything like it, the raw freedom, the sense of power. For a moment, he thought of the old legends of the Targaryens, how they had conquered the 7 kingdoms on the backs of dragons. This was how they had done it, wielding an unstoppable force from the skies. A swirling gust caught them, and Drogon angled his wings to ride the current. Robb's wound throbbed, but he hardly felt it in the midst of this impossible flight. They landed after only a short circuit, but it was enough to cement something new between them, between Robb, Daenerys, and Drogon. When they dismounted, Robb's legs nearly gave out, a mixture of relief and adrenaline. Daenerys glowed with an unspoken joy, even as the edges of her eyes showed lingering sorrow. Drogon folded his wings and let out a powerful roar that echoed across the hills, a roar that felt more triumphant than enraged. In the days that followed, Daenerys slowly reintroduced Drogon to the city's outskirts, ensuring he would not lash out. Robb assisted where he could, helping to establish safe grazing for goats and offering a calming presence. It was an odd role for him, one he never imagined fulfilling, but it forged a deeper bond with Daenerys. She came to trust his judgment, seeing how he sought to protect both her and the people of Meereen from Drogon's unpredictable might. Over time, the two of them developed a fragile kinship with the Black Dragon that surpassed any simple notion of master and beast. That kinship brought Daenerys to a momentous decision. She resolved to free Rhaegal and Viserion from their chains as well, to re-establish her full bond with all three dragons. The Sons of the Harpy continued their rebellion, and her hold on Meereen was tenuous. But with Robb's counsel, she found ways to minimize civilian casualties. He suggested new defensive strategies, drawing on his experience as a commander. At the same time, he witnessed Daenerys' unwavering dedication to freeing the oppressed. It resonated with Ned Stark's teachings on honor and duty. Gradually, talk of alliance resumed, no longer overshadowed by distrust. Daenerys learned of the horrors that had befallen the North, and her heart burned with rage against the treachery of Roose Bolton and Walder Frey. She, too, knew betrayal intimately. Bit by bit, they shared their scars, their regrets. An understanding formed, a kinship between a would-be king and a would-be queen who had each lost nearly everything. Finally, one evening in her private solar, Daenerys broached the subject directly. "If I come to Westeros with my armies and my dragons," she said, "will the North support me? Will they crown me queen and bend the knee, or will they follow a Stark?" Robb felt the weight of the question. Once he had worn a crown himself. But that crown had cost him dearly, and the realm was fractured. He recalled the vows his ancestors had made to House Targaryen centuries past. "The North has bled too much," he answered softly. "They need a secure hand, a queen who cares for justice, not just conquest. If I vouch for you, if I ride at your side, I believe many Northerners would follow. But know this, the North cannot simply be subjugated again, not after all we've endured. We need to be partners." She searched his face. "A partnership, then? I do not wish to be another tyrant. I wish to break that cycle of tyranny." A faint smile touched her lips, though her gaze was serious. "So be it. Let us unite our causes. You shall have your revenge on the Boltons and the Freys. In turn, the North will acknowledge me as queen. Together, we will tear down the Lannisters, the usurpers, and free the people they have oppressed." The flicker of renewed hope warmed Robb's heart. He bowed his head. "You have my word," he said, "and my sword if it's worth anything. Though your dragons may be far more persuasive." Daenerys nodded, but her expression softened. "Your sword has worth, Robb Stark, as does the loyalty and bravery you bring. And more than that, you have become a friend." The word hung between them, heavier than mere politeness. From that moment, the alliance was forged in earnest. Letters were dispatched to scattered Northern loyalists who had fled or gone into hiding, encouraging them to stand by, to prepare for a time when the tides would shift. Daenerys' advisors debated whether to sail immediately or continue consolidating power in Essos. Robb argued for careful planning. If they left before the city was stable, Meereen would plunge back into chaos. Daenerys listened, torn by her desire to reclaim her birthright and her responsibility to the freed slaves. In the interim, Robb found himself training with the Unsullied, honing his swordsmanship and spearwork. He taught some of his men their disciplined formations, while they taught him new tactics. It was a cultural exchange, forging bonds of mutual respect. He also became something of a caretaker for Drogon, who seemed to accept Robb's presence now, even allowing him to touch his scales without recoiling. Some in Meereen began to whisper that the young wolf had found a second life as the dragon's hand, though Robb dismissed such talk as nonsense. Yet behind the scenes, Jorah Mormont observed Robb's growing rapport with Daenerys with mixed feelings. He respected the Stark name, but he also carried a deep sense of personal regret and yearning for the Queen's favor. Ser Barristan, for his part, saw in Robb some echoes of Ned Stark's honor, which made him more kindly disposed. Others, like Dario Naharis, eyed Robb with a rakish grin, occasionally goading him into friendly rivalry. East Targaryen court was becoming an eclectic tapestry of personalities, and Robb had to navigate it with caution. Matters reached a critical juncture when Ukai and other slave cities formed a temporary alliance to retake Meereen, employing mercenary armies. Skirmishes erupted along the trade routes. Daenerys summoned Robb to her war council, and they pored over maps. She had the Unsullied, the Second Sons, and a growing number of freedmen willing to fight. Robb had a keen strategic mind and experience leading armies in Westeros, but the upcoming battles would be different: open desert warfare, siege tactics, and the potential deployment of dragons. A hush fell when Daenerys looked at Robb across the table and said, "The Yunkish armies are numerous, but they have never faced a dragon's wrath or a wolf's cunning. Will you ride Drogon into battle at my side?" Silence followed. Yora opened his mouth to protest, but said nothing. Ser Barristan's brow furrowed, uncertain. Robb felt a jolt of awe and trepidation. Mounting Drogon in the wilderness was one thing, but leading him into the thick of battle, guiding his fire, was another altogether. Yet a part of him thrilled at the idea. It would be a chance to repay some of the blood debt that weighed on his soul, to stand in the sky and strike fear into the slavers who would see free men chained again. He met Daenerys' gaze. "If Drogon accepts me, I will ride with you. Let the slavers tremble at the union of wolf and dragon." Word spread quickly through Meereen and beyond. King Robb Stark, believed dead in Westeros, was alive and had tamed Drogon alongside Daenerys Targaryen. Many doubted the veracity of these rumors, calling them tall tales. But among the freedmen, hope soared. The queen had an ally, a prince of wolves, and together they commanded dragons. Ukai mustered its forces, but desertions plagued their ranks as Sel's words reconsidered the odds. Even so, a large host advanced on Meereen, determined to overthrow the mother of dragons. On a blistering day, the battle was joined outside the city walls. Columns of Yunkish infantry and cavalry approached, siege engines creaking. Within Meereen, the Unsullied formed ranks, and freedmen archers lined the walls. Daenerys and Robb stood atop the largest pyramid, with Drogon perched on a massive platform designed for his launch. The other dragons, Viserion and Regal, circled high, ridden by no one but guided by Daenerys' presence. The tension was electric, the city bracing for the storm. Robb turned to Daenerys, his voice hushed. "I've never commanded a dragon in battle. Grey Wind was fierce, but this is something else." Daenerys offered a faint smile. "Remember what you felt that first flight, the bond, the trust. Drogon senses your heart, your intent. Let him lead and guide him where you must." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "We fly together, yes?" He nodded, steeling himself. "Yes." They mounted Drogon, Daenerys in front, Robb behind. The black dragon roared, the sound reverberating through the city. The crowd below cheered wildly, calling out both of their names. Then Drogon leapt from the platform, wings unfurling in a thunderous snap. The wind howled past them as they soared into the sky. Below, horns blared, and the gates opened as the Unsullied marched forth, ranks bristling with spears. Across the battlefield, the Yunkish army organized itself, archers knocking arrows, siege weapons cranking back. Daenerys pointed, and Drogon folded his wings, diving toward the front lines. A volley of arrows shot up, but many fell short. Those that reached Drogon clattered uselessly off his scaled hide. Robb felt the dragon's muscles coil as he spewed fire across the siege engines, igniting them in a hellish blaze. Screams rose from the slavers, panic rippling through their ranks. Viserion and Regal joined the assault, their flames streaking across the sky like vengeful comets. The Unsullied advanced with disciplined precision, capitalizing on the chaos. Watching from Drogon's back, Robb guided the dragon's flight, leaning to one side to signal a dive, to the other to pull up. Each time they unleashed Drogon's fire, entire swaths of the enemy lines collapsed into pandemonium. The proud Yunkish host disintegrated under a torrent of flame and steel. In the thick of it, Robb felt his heart pound with a fierce satisfaction. He recalled how his men had been massacred at the Twins, how the Freys had betrayed them. Now, at last, he was fighting with unstoppable might at his side. He was not blindly slaughtering, he was breaking the chains of tyrants. Daenerys cried out in Old Valyrian, spurring Drogon to wheel above a cavalry flank. Robb braced himself, and the dragon's inferno incinerated the riders in a single, terrible sweep. Some might call it savagery, but to Robb it felt like retribution for every injustice he had endured. By midday, the Yunkish lines were in full retreat. Some surrendered, throwing down weapons, huddling under white banners. Daenerys ordered the Unsullied to take them as prisoners, not to kill needlessly. Robb dismounted with Daenerys when Drogon settled on a scorched patch of earth outside the city. He nearly staggered, adrenaline shaking his limbs. He turned to see Daenerys regarding him with bright, fierce eyes. A hush enveloped them as the victorious armies pressed forward. The freedmen shouted in exultation. They had seen their queen and her Westerosi ally blaze across the skies, unstoppable. Daenerys announced the victory with a ringing voice, declaring once more that no man, woman, or child would remain in chains. Robb surveyed the battlefield, remembering the battles he had waged in Westeros. None had ended so decisively. Dragons changed everything. In the aftermath, as the city celebrated, Daenerys retreated to her chambers to rest. Robb, likewise spent, made for his own quarters but found himself summoned back by the Queen's maid. He arrived to see Daenerys leaning against a window, her face illuminated by the glow of distant fires. She looked both triumphant and weary. He bowed, but she gestured for him to rise. "We did it," she murmured. "You and I and Drogon." Robb nodded. "We did. Your people are free again. The slavers no fear." She turned, her gaze intense. "I meant what I said about your revenge. When the time is right, we will sail to Westeros. And I will help you liberate the North from the Boltons and the Freys. The Lannisters will fall as well. But I need you at my side." Robb inhaled, recalling the staggering cost of war. He remembered his father's honor, his mother's fierce love. He remembered Grey Wind cut down by Fry butchers. "My place is beside you," he said quietly. "Not as a subordinate, but as a partner. The North will follow me, and I will follow you. A pack bound with a dragon's flame." Daenerys's lips curved into a faint smile. "The wolf and the dragon. Our enemies will not know what hit them." They stood in companionable silence for a time, gazing out over the city that stretched beneath them. Fires still glowed where the battle had raged, but the noise of celebration drifted upward. For one shining moment, Robb felt the possibility of a new future. The ghosts of his past still lingered, but hope had rekindled in his heart. With Daenerys's alliance, he might reclaim the North, avenge his family, and build a realm that honored Ned Stark's values while standing with the Queen who believed in breaking chains. A swirl of wind carried the scent of ash and spice into the chamber. Daenerys turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. She regarded him with a measured gaze. "Rest tonight, Robb Stark. Tomorrow we have much to plan." As she departed, Robb exhaled, feeling the weight of new responsibilities settle on his shoulders. No longer was he the haunted fugitive of the Red Wedding. He was a wolf who had found a dragon's fire. And for the first time since the twins, he felt certain that the final chapters of his story had yet to be written. The next weeks brought a whirlwind of preparation for Daenerys's departure from Meereen. She had subdued the other slaver cities, forging a fragile peace in her wake. Now her eyes were fixed on Westeros, where the real battle for the Iron Throne loomed. Fleets were being commissioned from the Iron Islands under Yara Greyjoy's leadership, another soul who had once warred against the North but had since bent the knee to the Dragon Queen. Yara's alliance did not exactly thrill Robb, given the Ironborn's atrocities against his homeland, but he knew he had to set aside the old hatred for the greater cause. Before they departed, Daenerys resolved to break the chains of Rhaegal and Viserion as well. She led Robb into the dark catacombs beneath the pyramid where the two younger dragons had been bound for far too long. They snarled and hissed at first, resentful of their captivity. But Drogon's presence, hovering protectively in the darkness, had a soothing effect. Daenerys and Robb approached, speaking calming words. One by one, the chains were undone. Rhaegal snapped at Robb's hand, but he held steady, refusing to flinch. At length, the dragon withdrew, confusion and anger slowly subsiding. At last, Rhaegal and Viserion were free to slink out of the catacombs into the open air. They stretched their wings, roared at the sky. Daenerys wept at the sight, relieved to see her children free. Robb felt an odd pang as he watched the dragons circle overhead. He was no Targaryen, and he had no illusions about controlling them. Yet he shared a connection with Drogon that no one fully understood. Even Daenerys seemed puzzled at times, though she occasionally teased that perhaps the old gods of the North had found common ground with the fire of old Valyria. As the day of departure neared, Daenerys held court one last time in Meereen. She installed Daario Naharis and a council of freedmen as interim rulers, charging them with upholding the peace. Daario chafed at being left behind, but Daenerys insisted that she needed someone she trusted here. Meanwhile, Ser Barristan, Yora, Missandei, and others would accompany her back across the sea. Robb and his men readied themselves, packing supplies and arms, though they could scarcely contain their anticipation. Finally, the great moment arrived. A fleet of ships waited in the bay, sails bearing the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen or the kraken of House Greyjoy or even new banners proclaiming freedom. Thousands of freedmen and Meereenese citizens gathered to see the mother of dragons depart. The air hummed with excitement and dread, for all knew that beyond the ocean lay the mother of all wars. Robb stood on the deck of a large flagship, scanning the horizon. At his side were Hal Malin and a handful of Northmen who had survived the Red Wedding, now forging a new brotherhood in exile. Overhead, Daenerys soared on Drogon, flanked by Rhaegal and Viserion. Their shadows rippled across the water. She guided Drogon to land on the ship's stern, taking a perch from which she could address the assembly below. Robb couldn't help but marvel at the sight, dragon fire and sea wind entwined. Daenerys raised an arm, commanding attention. "People of Meereen," she called, her voice carrying across the docks. "I leave you in the hands of those who will protect your freedom. I go to Westeros to claim the throne that was stolen from my family, but I will never forget what we have built here. You are free, now and always." A great cheer erupted. The sails caught the wind and the ships began to move. The dragons took to the air, their roars echoing across the bay. The journey had begun. Days into the voyage, Robb found himself on the prow of the flagship, gazing at the sea. The salt spray reminded him of the craggy coasts near White Harbor, stirring memories of home. He had no illusions about the obstacles they would face. The Lannisters still held King's Landing, the Boltons Winterfell. The Freys controlled the river crossing at the Twins. The Tyrells, Martells, and other great houses might join or oppose them. Yet for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Robb believed they had a real chance. Daenerys joined him at the prow, dressed in practical black leathers, her hair braided back. Drogon soared overhead, occasionally diving to skim the waves as if impatient for the battles to come. "Westeros lies ahead," she said softly. Robb nodded, inhaling the briny air. "Yes. Are you ready to see it for the first time?" She paused, a flicker of emotion in her eyes. "I've dreamed of it for so long, but dreams can be dangerous when they clash with reality." He offered a wry smile. "Indeed, reality has a habit of showing us truths we'd rather ignore. But if you are half as determined as you were in Meereen, Westeros won't know what hit it." She let out a low laugh. "I hope so. We will need every advantage, my dragons, my Unsullied, the Ironborn fleet, and the Stark name. To see them kneel, I must show them that I come not as a conqueror alone, but as a liberator." Robb's gaze flicked to the distant horizon, imagining the tide of war that would wash over King's Landing. "Once, my father believed in justice above all. If you can show them that you do as well, many will rally to your cause." As they spoke, the sea breeze carried the faint call of horns. Scouts in the rigging shouted a warning, enemy ships on the horizon. Tension gripped the fleet momentarily, but Daenerys signaled for Drogon to investigate. The black dragon soared away, only to return with no sign of immediate threat. Likely a pirate vessel fleeing at the sight of dragons. Reassured, the fleet continued its course. Night fell, and lanterns glowed across the ships. Robb and Daenerys shared a meal of salted fish and flatbread on the deck, along with Jorah and Ser Barristan, discussing potential landfall. Dragonstone, the ancestral seat of House Targaryen, seemed a logical first step if Stannis Baratheon had truly abandoned it. From there, they would plan the invasion of the Crownlands and coordinate with any lords willing to rise against the Lannisters. When the meal concluded, Daenerys lingered. Jorah and Barristan withdrew, leaving the queen alone with Robb. She fixed him with a contemplative look, the lantern light reflecting in her eyes. "We have come so far in such a short time," she murmured, her voice steady. "You have shed blood for me, risked your life more than once. Yet we have barely scratched the surface of what lies ahead. Sometimes I wonder if we rush into a storm greater than any we have seen." Robb set aside his tin cup. "We might be, but we can't ignore the injustice that festers in the Seven Kingdoms. My people freeze under the Boltons' tyranny. The realm groans under the Lannisters' weight. And beyond it all, winter is coming. A real winter." She nodded, eyes distant. "I've heard tales of the White Walkers, the army of the dead. Some believe it's mere superstition." "Ned Stark believed," Robb said quietly. "And so do I. The Night's Watch has tried to warn the realm. That warning goes unheeded, overshadowed by petty wars. But once we take King's Landing, perhaps we can unite the realm against the true threat." A silence stretched between them, charged with the enormity of the tasks ahead. Then Daenerys reached out and lightly clasped Robb's hand. "We will do it together," she said, her tone resolute as if that settled the matter. He felt a rush of warmth, a sense of camaraderie that transcended mere alliance. "Together," he echoed. Months later, the prow of the fleet touched the shores of Dragonstone beneath slate-gray skies. The castle loomed above, its stone dragons perched on ramparts. Daenerys, Robb, and their retinue came ashore in small boats, boots crunching on the black sand. Drogon, Viserion, and Regal soared overhead, their roars heralding the Targaryen return to Westeros. Scouts found the castle abandoned, save for a token garrison that fled at the sight of dragons. Daenerys took up residence in the ancient fortress, the war room brimming with maps of the Seven Kingdoms. Ravens were sent north, south, and west, announcing the arrival of the rightful Targaryen queen. A flurry of responses arrived over the next weeks. Some lords pledged fealty, others waited to see which way the wind would blow. Cersei Lannister still held King's Landing with an iron grip. Euron Greyjoy threatened the seas. The Boltons entrenched themselves in Winterfell, ignorant of the doom that might fall upon them from the sky. Robb's focus was the north. He sent covert messages to the remaining loyal houses, the Mormonts, the Reeds, the Glovers. Word came back that some of them had begun to rally in secret, awaiting their rightful king. Yet the road north was long, and the Lannisters' hold on the riverlands blocked easy passage. Robb proposed a two-pronged strategy. While Daenerys threatened the capital, he and a contingent of dragons, likely Drogon, would fly north. Liberate the north from the Boltons, rally the Stark's bannermen, then meet Daenerys in a grand pincer move against King's Landing. It was a bold plan, and Daenerys hesitated to split her forces. But she trusted Robb's knowledge of the north, and she recognized that subduing the Boltons would remove a crucial enemy flank. So, in the courtyard of Dragonstone, beneath a swirling sky, they prepared to part ways. Robb stood clad in furs over boiled leather, the Stark dire wolf sigil emblazoned on his surcoat. Daenerys wore a dark cloak lined with silver. Around them, Unsullied drilled, and Northmen newly arrived from White Harbor conversed with Dothraki riders, bridging worlds that had never before met. They paused before Drogon, who snorted impatiently, black scales shimmering. Regal and Viserion perched on the castle walls, thrumming low. Daenerys rested a hand on Drogon's flank, then turned to Robb. "Bring me Roose Bolton's head," she said softly, her eyes alight with unwavering resolve. "For your family. For mine." Robb inclined his head, his jaw set. "He will pay for what he did, and the North will rise again." She studied him a moment longer, then drew closer. To his surprise, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his cheek in a brief, fierce gesture of solidarity. An unspoken vow. "Fly swiftly, Robb Stark." He swallowed, a tumult of emotion surging within him. "And you, burn away the Lannisters' cruelty." With that, Robb stepped away, hoisting himself onto Drogon's back. A cadre of mounted Dothraki archers and a group of Northman loyalists would follow on horseback, while the bulk of Daenerys' forces remained at Dragonstone, planning the assault on King's Landing. As Robb gripped Drogon's ridges, the dragon let out a massive roar that rattled the courtyard. The watchers drew back, shielding their eyes. Then, with a powerful downward sweep of his wings, Drogon launched into the air, bearing Robb Stark away toward the north. Below, Daenerys watched him go, cloak billowing in the gusts. The wolf and the dragon, now parted, each carrying the weight of a monumental task. Yet their bond, tested by betrayal and forged in fire, remained unbroken. A chapter had closed, but the climax of their story, and the fate of Westeros, lay ahead. Robb soared above the narrow waters, the wind howling in his ears. He clutched the harness he'd fashioned, which was strapped around Drogon's shoulders. The northern men rode below in ships or along the coast, but his journey would be far swifter. He felt a savage thrill, imagining the moment he descended on Winterfell's walls with Drogon's fire at his call. The Boltons thought him dead. How poetic that a black-winged vengeance would prove them fatally wrong. His side still bore the faded scars of the Red Wedding. Each time he felt the pull of those wounds, he remembered how close he had come to losing everything. Now he was more alive than ever, his pulse racing as Drogon covered leagues in mere hours. They passed over the Vale's mountain passes, glimpsing the Ares' distant peaks. Over the neck into the north. The air grew colder, the forests denser. Robb's heart twisted at the sight. This was home. This was the land he'd vowed to protect. He guided Drogon to a secluded glen near the borders of the Wolfswood. They needed to rest, and he needed to make contact with the scattered loyalists who had signaled they would await him. The dragon made an uneasy bedfellow in the north's coniferous groves, so Robb kept watch through the night. In the morning, a small band of men approached cautiously, eyes wide at the sight of Drogon. They carried banners bearing the sigils of House Glover and House Mormont. When Robb rose to greet them, they nearly fell to their knees in shock. None had truly believed the rumors that the young wolf lived and commanded a dragon. "The North remembers," an older Glover bannerman whispered, eyes brimming with awe. "My lord, we thought you dead." "Dead no longer," Robb replied. "Gather all who remain loyal. We ride to Winterfell. We will free our home from the Boltons, and the next time the Freys cross our path, the only crossing they'll know is Drogon's fire." Over the coming days, the Northern bannermen rallied to the secret mustering point. They marveled at Drogon, some praying to the old gods for guidance, uncertain how to feel about a dragon in the north. But once Robb explained that Daenerys Targaryen supported their cause, most recognized the necessity of this new alliance. Mormont's soldiers arrived with Lady Lyanna Mormont, a fierce young girl who commanded respect far beyond her years. The Karstarks and Umbers, or what fragments remained of their line, cautiously inquired if Robb would accept their fealty given their complicated histories. He did, understanding that unity was paramount if they were to stand against Roose Bolton. Scouts reported that Ramsay Bolton was in Winterfell, controlling the castle while his father, Roose, dealt with southern matters. The cruelty inflicted on the small folk was unspeakable, and morale across the north was at an all-time low. That only steeled Robb's resolve. He planned meticulously, coordinating a multi-pronged assault on Winterfell's gates while Drogon attacked from above. The Loyalists advanced under cover of night, storming the outer walls. Ramsay's men, taken by surprise, nonetheless fought viciously, but they were unprepared for dragon fire. Drogon's flames shattered the main gates, sending Bolton men scattering. Robb dismounted amid the chaos, leading a charge of Northmen through the courtyard. His sword gleamed, and the memory of the Red Wedding drove every strike. Shouts echoed off the ancient stones of Winterfell, once his home, now a prison of terror. He fought with fury and purpose, rallying the men around him. Arrows rained down from ramparts until Drogon landed atop the walls, roaring, sending archers fleeing in terror. In the heart of the battle, Robb faced Ramsay Bolton himself, the bastard who had taken so much pleasure in torment. Ramsay sneered, brandishing curved daggers. "The young wolf returns from the grave," he mocked, though fear lurked behind his eyes. "Shall I flay you as I did your men?" "You will never harm another soul," Robb snarled, lunging. Their blades clashed in a frenzy of sparks. Ramsay was quick and cunning, but Robb had purpose that transcended skill. He battered aside Ramsay's defenses, a savage dance of steel. At last, he disarmed the Bolton bastard, sending his dagger skittering across the stones. Ramsay, cornered, spat curses. "Please," he simpered suddenly, feigning fear. "Spare me, my lord. I'll be loyal. Robb's eyes burned with the ghosts of the Red Wedding, of Grey Wind, of his mother. He drove his sword through Ramsay's heart without a word. The bastard's eyes widened in shock, and he crumpled. A hush descended on that portion of the courtyard, the remaining Bolton men staring in horror. Then the Loyalists roared, pressing their advantage. Outside the castle, Northmen overcame the last pockets of resistance. By dawn, Winterfell was reclaimed. Robb Stark, king in the north, walked the broken battlements with blood still on his armor. Tears pricked his eyes when he surveyed the old courtyard where he and Jon Snow had once practiced swordplay, where Bran used to climb. So much lost. Yet some measure of justice had been delivered. The direwolf sigil once again flew from Winterfell's towers. In the great hall, the northern lords assembled, each pledging fealty anew. The statue of the direwolf was raised, though the memory of Ned Stark, Catelyn Stark, and all who were gone weighed heavily in every corner. When they asked about Daenerys Targaryen, Robb spoke of her vision for a just realm where old grudges might be set aside to face the real threats. Some balked at the idea of bending the knee to a Targaryen, but the sight of Drogon perched on Winterfell's ramparts, a living testament to her power, quelled much dissent. Those who remained rebellious soon understood that Robb Stark's loyalty to the Queen was unbreakable. News of Ramsay's defeat and the reclaiming of Winterfell spread across the north like wildfire. Roose Bolton, hearing of his son's death and the presence of a dragon, retreated south with the few men he had. Walder Frey raged in the Twins, but he too feared dragon fire. The north, at least for now, was free of the usurpers who had stained it with blood. Robb wasted no time sending ravens to Daenerys at Dragonstone, declaring his success and reaffirming their alliance. He urged her to strike soon while the enemy reeled. From the crypts of Winterfell, Robb took a moment alone. He knelt before the statue of Ned Stark, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. "I failed you," he whispered. "I failed Mother. But I'm trying, Father. I swear I will protect the North. I'll break the chains of those who would enslave it. And I have found allies, even dragons," his voice faltered. For a moment he thought he sensed a presence, a warm breeze in the cold crypt. Perhaps it was only his imagination. He rose, resolved. With Winterfell secured, he must now march south to aid Daenerys. The road to King's Landing lay open, and the final confrontation with the Lannisters and the Freys loomed. But he would not face it alone. The North would follow him, and the Dragon Queen awaited him. The dream of justice, of a realm where no Frey dared butcher guests, where no Bolton dared flay living men, burned in his heart. And though the night was dark, the dawn was coming, illuminated by dragon fire and the unyielding will of a young wolf who refused to die. So it was that Robb Stark, the once dead king in the north, stood upon the walls of Winterfell beside Drogon, gazing southward. Snowflakes drifted in the morning light, heralding the onset of winter. But the flames of vengeance and hope burned bright, a beacon for all who yearned for justice. A single thought echoed in his mind: the North remembers, and the dragon stands with us. Together, they would shape the fate of Westeros or die in the attempt. Robb Stark stood on the walls of Winterfell in the early morning light, the cold northern wind slicing across his cheeks, carrying with it the scent of pine from the wolf's wood and the faint promise of snow. The great black shape of Drogon crouched on a sturdy section of rampart not far away, shaking loose frost from his scales. Even now, months after reclaiming his birthright from the Boltons, Robb had not grown entirely accustomed to the sight of a dragon perched against the familiar stone of his ancestral home. Each time he looked upon Drogon, he thought of Daenerys and how their alliance had come to pass against all odds, a Targaryen queen and a Stark king joined in purpose. He often felt a tangle of awe and gratitude bound with the faint tremor of fear that any sensible man would feel towards such a creature of living flame. Ramsay Bolton was dead, his father fled south, and Winterfell once again belonged to House Stark. Yet the cost of all that had transpired was etched in the silent corridors and the half-charred timbers. Rebuilding efforts continued throughout the castle, and already the yard had begun to bustle with new life. Stonemasons traveled from White Harbor, carpenters from Barrowton, all keen to lend their skills now that the true king in the north had returned. But the north faced deeper wounds than broken walls. The memory of betrayal at the Twins, the savage cruelty under the Boltons, and the looming specter of winter itself weighed heavily on every soul. Robb turned from the battlements, his fur-trimmed cloak snapping in the wind. He descended the winding steps into the courtyard where men and women busied themselves with reconstruction. Some paused in their labor to bow or salute. Robb acknowledged them with a curt nod. The formality still felt strange after so long in hiding, but he had learned to accept that the North needed a figurehead to rally around. On the far side of the courtyard, he spied Lady Lyanna Mormont, no more than a child, yet fierce as any grown warrior, supervising the training of new recruits. Word had spread quickly that the king in the north honored her counsel. Some of the men balked at taking orders from a girl, but no one dared openly defy Lady Mormont. She saw him and raised a hand, her face set with iron determination, before turning back to instruct the trainees. He made his way inside. The great hall, half refurbished, still smelled of fresh-cut lumber and mortar, layered over the older scents of smoke and blood. Repairs in the aftermath of the Bolton occupation had been extensive, and the hall's once proud banners were being replaced. One by one, freshly stitched dire wolf sigils lined the walls, proclaiming the restoration of House Stark. In the center of the hall, benches had been arranged to form a makeshift meeting area for the lords and representatives who trickled in daily to pay homage, swear fealty, or seek the king's favor. Seated by the hearth was Hal Mullen, the man who had rescued Robb from the Twins and helped nurse him back to health. With him were several other Northmen, including a Glover bannerman and 2 Umbers, gruff men in thick cloaks who took their ale like a daily medicine. They stood up when Robb entered, bowing with the stiff awkwardness of men who preferred swords to formalities. "My lord," said Hal, gesturing for Robb to join them. "We were just discussing the muster of forces for the march south." Robb's brow furrowed. "Is there fresh word from beyond the neck?" The Glover man nodded. Roose Bolton retreated to the Twins, seeking shelter with the Freys. "His force is splintered. He had to leave behind a garrison at Moat Cailin, but they're poorly supplied and low in morale. Our scouts say he's lost the taste for an immediate fight in the north." Robb felt a cold satisfaction bloom in his chest. He would have preferred to see Roose Bolton's head mounted on a spike the day Winterfell was reclaimed, but the victory over Ramsay had forced the older Bolton to flee. Walder Frey had welcomed him, 2 treacherous devils beneath one roof. "Do we know if they plan a counterattack?" One of the Umbers, a huge man with broad shoulders and a scar across his cheek, spat on the floor. "They're likely biding their time, waiting to see if we'll march on them." Word in the Riverlands is that Walder Frey has sent envoys to King's Landing, trying to broker a better alliance with the Lannisters. They want help turning us back. Robb's jaw tightened. He recalled how Walder Frey had bragged of the Lannisters paying the cost for the Red Wedding. A fresh wave of bitterness threatened to rise in him, but he forced it down. Let them gather all the allies they can. We have Daenerys Targaryen's dragons, and the North stands united behind us. The Freys and the Boltons will see that their cruelty ends here. The men murmured agreement. Hal cleared his throat. Will you ride out soon, my lord? Or do we wait for the Queen to make her move on King's Landing? Robb's eyes flicked across their faces. I have no intention of waiting idly while the Freys regroup. We've secured Winterfell, but there are other houses in the north that remain cautious or silent. Not all Karstarks have sworn to me, nor the Riders, nor the Dustins. Some bear old grudges, some are simply fearful. We must gather them fully, show them that House Stark is the surest shield against the coming storms. Then we march south. I've already sent a raven to Daenerys. She knows we can't tarry long. The snows grow heavier each day, and I won't risk traveling in deep winter if we can help it. He paused, eyeing the Umbers. As soon as we have the north secured, I want a portion of our forces to head down the King's Road, bridging the gap near Moat Cailin. We'll link up with the Queen's armies once they arrive in the Riverlands, and we'll see about toppling Walder Frey's hold on the twins. The meeting continued with more details, logistics for supplying the troops, assigning outriders, contacting houses that had not yet pledged. A large portion of their confidence came from Drogon. In earlier times, the North might have struggled to unite under an untested king, but the presence of a fire-breathing dragon had a way of settling old arguments. When the men dispersed, Robb drew Hal Malin aside. They walked through the corridor toward the solar that Robb now used as his private workspace. "Any word from my siblings?" he asked quietly. Hal lowered his voice. "We've had rumors about Lady Sansa being at the Eyrie under the protection of her aunt, but that was before the Vale shut its gates. Another rumor says she fled again or was forced into some marriage. No one's certain. As for Arya, gods only know. Some say she's in the Riverlands. Others claim she was lost across the narrow sea. And Bran, Rickon. The old stories said they died when Theon Greyjoy took Winterfell, but there were whispers one survived. It's all madness." A pang of grief cut through Robb. He'd lost track of his younger siblings in the chaos of the war. Arya had vanished after their father's execution. Bran and Rickon had been presumed dead, though in his heart he had never fully believed it. "Keep searching. If there's any word, no matter how small, I want to hear it." Hal nodded solemnly. "Of course, my lord." Robb retreated into the solar, finding it warmed by a crackling fireplace. A large table occupied the center, covered in maps and scattered parchments. He ran a hand over the battered surface, his mind flitting to Daenerys. He wondered where she was at that moment, likely still on Dragonstone, or perhaps already sailing up the Blackwater Bay to test the Lannisters' resolve. Letters traveled so slowly and the shifting tides of war moved too fast. They had parted with the promise of mutual aid, but each had their own front to solidify before combining forces. His gaze fell upon a half-written letter to her. He had tried to express the complexities of unifying the North without sounding weak or uncertain. He had written of his faith in her leadership, of the need to crush the frays between his host and hers if they were to truly avenge the Red Wedding. Yet, no matter how many words he penned, there was something missing, some intangible bond that had formed between them in Essos and grown amid the flames of battle. He suspected that no letter could convey it. Just as he took a seat, a muted roar from outside shook the walls. He could hear the commotion, Drogon taking flight from the ramparts, scattering crows in all directions. He'd grown restless in the cold. The watchers on the walls would let him come and go so long as he didn't stray too far or terrorize the local villages. Thus far, the beast's presence had not caused any serious incidents, save for a few anxious shepherds who complained about singed fences. Robb had taken care to compensate them and remind Drogon, so far as one could remind a dragon, to keep away from livestock that was not explicitly offered. He rubbed his temples, drained from the day's demands. The glare of winter sunlight filtered through the arrow-slit window, revealing dancing motes of dust. He tried to focus on the map before him, plans for the southwestern approach, potential choke points near the Bar Roland's supply lines. Yet his thoughts kept drifting to the war's larger meaning, to the possibility of forging a new future. The words he had exchanged with Daenerys in Meereen still echoed in his head, the dream of breaking the wheel, ending the tyranny that had claimed so many innocents. Before the sun set, Robb rose and decided to tour the castle anew to ensure that every corner was being rebuilt with care. Winterfell held many memories for him, some haunting, some precious. The corridors still felt too quiet in places where the Bolton flayings had left their indelible mark. Servants rushed to and fro, carrying tools, rushes for fresh floor coverings, and casks of ale for the workers. In the rear courtyard, he passed the old blacksmith's forge. He paused, feeling an ache as he recalled the times he and Jon Snow had lingered there, learning to sharpen swords under the watchful eye of Mikken. The anvil was replaced now, the old one stolen or destroyed by the Boltons. A new blacksmith hammered away, forging arrowheads. Sparks danced in the waning daylight. A small shape darted past him, and he turned to see a girl of perhaps 8 or 9, carrying a wooden practice sword. She skidded to a stop upon recognizing him, eyes wide with awe, then gave a hurried bow. "My king," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's your name?" Robb asked gently. "Bess, my king," she said, her breath puffing in the chill air. "I was only practicing in the yard. Didn't mean to trouble you." He knelt so his gaze was level with hers. "No trouble. You remind me of my sister, Arya. She used to carry a wooden sword around Winterfell." The girl blinked. "Is it true she's a warrior now, my lord? That she's slain 100 men?" He forced a small smile. "Rumors, half-truths, nobody knew Arya's real fate. If she's out there, I'm sure she's every bit as fierce as you can imagine. Keep practicing. The North needs strong folk of all ages." She bobbed her head and scampered away, leaving Robb to straighten slowly, heart heavy with the longing that one day he might see Arya's determined face again. So many illusions had been shattered by war, but hope lingered in the small corners of Winterfell, in every child's eyes that looked to him for leadership. He could not fail them. Not again. At dinner that night, he convened with various northern lords in the Great Hall. The feast was humble, for the North had no surplus to waste, but warm bread and hearty stew kept away the chill. Lady Lyanna Mormont sat to Robb's left, chin up, listening intently to the talk of war. The Greyjohn's nephew, a newly raised leader of the Umbers, sat to his right, nursing a tankard of ale. All around them, men and women discussed the threats ahead. It was a far cry from the lavish feasts House Stark used to host, but it suited the grim determination of the North's newly reclaimed unity. Partway through the meal, a messenger arrived, traveling all the way from White Harbor with news from the south. Robb watched the young man approach, breathless and red-cheeked from the cold. The entire hall hushed as he presented a sealed scroll to Robb, who broke the wax and read by torchlight. Daenerys Targaryen had landed on the shores of Th. Crownlands, or so the letter claimed. She had established a beachhead near the Blackwater Rush. The details were vague. Her forces clashed with Lannister scouts, and she was said to have burned a portion of the Lannister fleet with dragon fire. There was no direct letter from Daenerys, only reports gleaned from traveling merchants. Yet the gist was clear, the Queen was making her move. Cersei Lannister would be forced to respond. Robb could almost picture Daenerys riding Drogon across the skies of King's Landing, the golden roofs shining under the threat of dragon fire. He set the parchment down, ignoring the curious stares of those around him, and took a steadying breath. If Daenerys was already in open conflict with the Lannisters, then time was more precious than ever. He would have to march south soon, or risk losing their coordinated advantage. The question was, how many men could he safely bring without leaving the North vulnerable to either the snows or the lurking threat of White Walkers, which so many still dismissed as rumor? That night he hardly slept, pacing his solar, mind full of the perils that lay ahead. By dawn he summoned the primary northern lords and made his decision known. They would mobilize a substantial host, perhaps 5,000 men, to march to Moat Cailin. Another portion would remain behind to guard Winterfell, prepare for winter, and watch for any sign that the others truly threatened the wall. He still had no direct word from the Night's Watch, no official cry for help, but the old tales gnawed at him. He would not leave the North undefended. Within days, the courtyard bustled with preparations for departure. Horses were shod, carts loaded, arms and armor inspected. Icicles hung from the edges of the roofs, and the breath of men and beasts misted in the frigid air. Robb moved among them, offering a word of encouragement here, a piece of advice there. Despite the hardship, there was an undercurrent of hope. For so long, the North had felt powerless under the Boltons and the Freys. Now, as the standard of House Stark flew once more and a dragon roared in the sky, they believed again in the possibility of a better tomorrow. The day before they were set to ride, Robb received an unexpected visitor, a craggy-faced man in black furs introducing himself as Dolorous Ed Tollett of the Night's Watch. He arrived at Winterfell half-frozen and carrying a letter from Castle Black. Robb admitted him to the solar where a roaring fire gave some relief from the cold. Ed took the seat offered, looking around with a grim, tired expression. "You've come a long way," Robb said quietly. "What news?" Ed cleared his throat. "Grimmer than I care to deliver, Your Grace. The Night's Watch is in dire straits. Lord Commander Snow, aye." Robb's heart skipped. "Jon Snow is Lord Commander?" "Aye, he was," Ed said, gloom etched into every line of his face. "He led us as best he could, but the wall is threatened as never before. The dead gather beyond, White Walkers and Whites in numbers we can't begin to guess. Jon Snow was slain by mutineers within the Watch, men who couldn't abide his decisions. But then, well, the Red Woman, there was a miracle. He returned." Robb sat down heavily, trying to process the rush of words. "He returned? You speak of dark sorcery?" "I speak of something. I don't claim to understand it. All I know is that he lives again, though it changed him. He's no longer Lord Commander. He left the Watch, declared his vows ended by death, and he marched south. We lost track of him for a time. Now rumor says he's in the wild somewhere, or perhaps found refuge with wildlings we brought through the wall. The situation is complicated." Robb's eyes flickered with conflicting emotions. So Jon lived? After death, after so much. He remembered Jon's somber face, the love they bore for each other despite their different mothers. "Why have you come all this way, then?" Ed sighed. "Because we're desperate. The Watch is short on men and supplies. Winter is nearly upon us and the army of the dead doesn't wait for politics. We need every hand to man the wall or none of these southern wars will matter. The White Walkers will sweep down upon us all." Robb closed his eyes, the weight of duty pressing down. He had expected the White Walkers to be real, had feared this moment. Yet the war with the Lannisters and the Freys was immediate and tangible while this other threat, monstrous as it was, loomed at the edge of the world. "I hear your plea," he said, voice rough. "But the North has just emerged from bloodshed. We're barely on our feet. Even now, I prepare to march south to help Daenerys Targaryen dethrone the Lannisters. If the threat is as dire as you say, how can we fight two wars at once?" Ed's eyes were hollow. "You might not have a choice, Your Grace. Winter is coming, and so is the army of the dead." Robb stared into the fire, remembering how Ned Stark had always warned them of the tales from beyond the wall. "Stay here and rest, Master Tollett. Let me speak with my advisors. I won't ignore your warning." That evening, Robb convened a secret council with Lady Lyanna Mormont, the Umbers, the Glovers, and a few others he trusted implicitly. He shared the news from the Night's Watch, the possible resurrection of Jon Snow, and the imminent march south. The lords exchanged uneasy glances, some clearly disbelieving tales of walking corpses. But Lyanna Mormont, with her direct gaze, said, "The Watch has no reason to lie. My mother died fighting wildlings and she believed the threat was real. I say we take it seriously." An older lord snorted. "We can't fight the dead. We can barely fight the living. We only just reclaimed Winterfell." Another spat, "We've an alliance with a dragon queen, should we break that to run off to the wall?" The room erupted into conflicting voices. Robb listened, letting them air their fears. At length he raised a hand, silencing them. "I will not break faith with Daenerys Targaryen. Our alliance stands. We march south to destroy the Freys and the Lannisters. But we also cannot ignore the Watch's warning. Here is what we'll do. I will take a portion of our forces south, the best fighters. Lady Lyanna, I want you to remain in Winterfell to oversee the defense of the castle and the north. If the dead come, you'll have men here to hold them back, or at least slow them until we can return. In the meantime, we will send the Watch whatever aid we can spare, food, supplies, a few reinforcements. Not a full army, but enough to show we heed their call." Lyanna's little jaw set. "I'd be proud to defend Winterfell. House Mormont stands ready." Robb met her gaze, marveling at how a girl so young could bear such a burden without flinching. "And if Jon Snow should appear, or if any urgent summons comes from the wall, send a raven immediately. If the threat becomes dire, we'll break off from our southern campaign and race north again." The council reluctantly agreed, though none were truly satisfied. Such was the state of Westeros, wars on all sides, a winter creeping in, and unnatural foes rumored at their doorstep. Robb dismissed the council, feeling the cold weight of leadership settle more heavily than ever. He sought out Dolorous Ed before the man could collapse into exhausted sleep. I won't be able to march an entire army to the wall, Robb told him quietly, but I can send you with wagons of grain, furs, weapons. Perhaps a few hundred soldiers to reinforce the garrison. Will it help? Ed dipped his head. It will, your grace. My thanks. Though I fear it may not be enough when the dead come in force. Robb's lips pressed into a tight line. If that day arrives, I'll be at the wall myself with all the dragons and armies I can muster. I won't let the north fall. My father taught me better than that. Ed only nodded, a weary respect in his eyes. The next morning dawned pale and cold, the sky overcast. The horns echoed through Winterfell's courtyards, calling the troops to assemble. Robb, clad in dark leather and steel pauldrons, strapped on his sword belt. He passed through the gates into a swirl of activity, banners fluttered, horses whinnied, men shouted final farewells to loved ones. Drogon crouched beyond the walls, looming like a living mountain of black scales. He snorted puffs of flame, impatient for action. One by one, the northern houses that would join the march came forward. The Umbers contributed a sizable contingent, the Glovers too, and scattered lesser houses sent what men they could spare. In total, perhaps 4,000 seasoned fighters, plus another 1,000 in reserve who would follow behind with supply wagons. It was not the grand host Robb had once commanded early in the war, but it was strong, tempered by adversity, and led by a king who had survived death itself. Robb addressed them from atop a makeshift platform, his voice carrying over the gathered ranks. Men and women of the north, we ride to avenge our kin, to free the Riverlands from the Frey Scourge, and to uphold our alliance with Daenerys Targaryen. Some say it's folly to leave home when winter is so close. But I say we must finish what was begun at the Red Wedding, only then can we truly protect our people from all threats, be they Lannisters, Freys, or worse. We go forth as Starks, as Northmen united under the dire wolf banner. May the old gods guide us. A roar of approval rose from the crowd, though tempered by the grim understanding of war. Robb dismounted the platform and moved to where Lady Lyanna Mormont stood with her small retinue of Bear Island warriors. He clasped her hand in farewell. Hold Winterfell. If word comes from the wall, if the threat truly arrives. She met his eyes fiercely. We'll hold as long as we can. And the raven will fly to you. He nodded. The old gods watch over you. She offered a slight bow. And you, my king. With that, Robb strode to Drogon, the ground trembling beneath the dragon's shifting weight. A hush fell as he placed one hand on the creature's scaled flank. In the time since Meereen, he had fashioned a sturdier harness of leather and iron buckles designed to let him ride more safely. He pulled himself up, finding the handholds by memory, then settled into position. Drogon let out a low rumble, half warning, half acceptance. The gates creaked open. Horses trotted out, lines of men marching behind them. Robb nudged Drogon's flank with his heels. With a powerful leap, the dragon launched himself skyward, wings beating the air in a rush of wind and snow. Below, the northern host spread out across the plains, some gazing upward with awed expressions. Even from this height, Robb felt their sense of unity, their determination. He angled Drogon south, the wind stinging his face, heart pounding with the exhilaration that always came with flight. In the distance, the broken branch shimmered with thin ice, and beyond it lay the great stretch of the King's Road. A sense of finality tugged at him. He was leaving Winterfell yet again, unsure of what he would find upon his return. But he could not turn back. Daenerys was forging ahead, taking the fight to the Lannisters, and he must stand by her side. The Freys would fall. Roose Bolton would pay for his crimes. Only then could the North truly heal. The journey south was grueling, despite the advantage of a dragon overhead. Winter's creeping chill made supplies scarce. The nights brought frigid winds that howled through hastily erected camps. Ice rimmed the edges of their cloaks come morning. Yet morale remained steadier than Robb might have expected. After all, these were Northmen used to hardship, and each step brought them closer to vengeance on the Freys. Drogon soared ahead or circled above like a deadly omen, ensuring that roving bandits or stray Bolton loyalists gave their column a wide berth. Near Moat Cailin, they found the fortress lightly held by Bolton soldiers who quickly surrendered at the sight of dragon fire. Robb stationed a small garrison, ensuring the causeway remained under Stark control. Still further south, they passed ravaged villages that had suffered from the years of war and the pillaging by various armies. Whenever possible, Robb's men offered help, distributing what supplies they could spare. Word spread that the king in the north traveled with a dragon, punishing any who preyed on the small folk. A handful of young volunteers joined their column, hungry for a chance to strike back at the Freys. Eventually, the land began to shift into the rolling hills and thicker forests of the Riverlands. Here, the scars of war were stark, farms burned, fields left fallow, roads littered with debris. Under normal circumstances, they might have faced constant harassment by raiders or Lannister outriders, but rumors of Drogon effectively cleared the way. Days stretched into weeks of slow, deliberate progress, always mindful of supply lines. At last, scouts brought news. Daenerys Targaryen's forces had crossed the Blackwater and were encamped near a ruined castle that once belonged to House Rosby east of the Rosby Road. King's Landing lay not far beyond. The Queen had been skirmishing with Lannister forces, testing Cersei's defenses. More significantly, she had apparently acquired allies from Dorne and the Reach. At least parts of the Tyrell and Martell forces had pledged to her. The Ironborn under Yara Greyjoy also patrolled the coast. But all was not straightforward. Euron Greyjoy contested the seas, and the Lannisters had made cunning moves, even poisoning key supply routes to hamper Daenerys's newly landed armies. Robb weighed his options. He could attempt to ride west first to crush Walder Frey at the Twins, or he could press on and coordinate with Daenerys directly, ensuring the Lannisters faced two fronts. As much as he loathed Walder Frey, he knew the old man would not easily leave the safety of the Twins to face him in open battle. Taking that fortress by storm could prove costly. Better, perhaps, to strike a blow at the Lannisters' heart, forcing Frey to dispatch men or risk losing all. If the Lannisters fell, the Freys would be isolated. Thus he made his choice: press southeast, link with the Queen, and then decide how best to annihilate Walder Frey. Over the next few days, the northern host skirted areas heavily patrolled by Lannister bannermen, sometimes using hidden byways. Robb took to scouting with Drogon at dawn, soaring high above in the pale sky, marking enemy positions from a vantage they could not match. Those glimpses revealed large Lannister camps near the roads to King's Landing, but no significant movement to challenge them. Clearly, Cersei had learned the stories of Dragonfire and thought better of open confrontation, at least for now. One frigid morning, as dawn lighted the horizon in bands of gold and blue, Robb crested a wooded hill and beheld a sight that sent a surge of anticipation through him. Tents stretching across a wide clearing, banners flapping in the breeze. Banners of the Targaryen dragon, the Tyrell rose, and the Martell sun. Sentries in unfamiliar armor patrolled the perimeter, though as he neared, they pointed skyward with alarm at Drogon's silhouette. Robb guided the dragon to land in a field just outside the camp, scattering a handful of startled horses. A knot of Unsullied hurried forward, spears at the ready. Robb slid down from Drogon's flank, raising his hands in a show of peace. He recognized a few of the Unsullied, though their faces were as impassive as ever. He cleared his throat. "I am Robb Stark, king in the north, ally to Daenerys Targaryen. I've come to meet my queen." Their commander, bearing an ornate spear, studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Welcome, King Robb Stark. The queen will want to see you at once." Robb turned to Drogon, giving the beast a firm pat. "Stay here, boy, and don't singe anyone unless they attack us." Drogon hissed, as if annoyed at the cautionary tone, but settled onto his haunches, wings half-folded. Escorted by Unsullied, Robb passed through the outer fringes of the camp. The crisp air carried the mingled scents of canvas, horses, and cooking fires. Men and women glanced up from their tasks: Westerosi knights, Dornish spearmen, Dothraki riders, and a scattering of freedmen from Essos. It was a tapestry of cultures rarely seen side by side, united under one banner. A hum of tension underlay every conversation, for the walls of King's Landing were but a day's march away. Robb caught snatches of rumor: how Daenerys's dragons had burned a small Lannister outpost along the Rosby Road, how Euron Greyjoy circled the Blackwater Bay, threatening to cut off supplies. Talk of infiltration by Lannister spies, of sabotage, of Tyrell vengeance for Marjorie's demise. He heard all this in passing, feeling the web of alliances and animosities that Daenerys struggled to balance. They stopped before the largest pavilion, black and red cloth embroidered with the three-headed dragon. Unsullied stood guard, and a pair of Dothraki bloodriders eyed him. Then the flap lifted, and Robb stepped inside. Warmth enveloped him, fed by braziers and thick carpets. The space was well appointed, though still military in nature. A large table with maps, several chests, a writing desk. And there, clad in dark leathers and a red-trimmed cloak, stood Daenerys Targaryen. She looked up the moment he entered, and a flicker of relief and joy crossed her features. tempered by the gravity of leadership. She was flanked by advisors, Tyrion Lannister, gray-eyed and thoughtful, Missandei, poised and watchful, and Ser Jorah Mormont, who wore a guarded expression at the sight of Robb. Nearby, Ser Barristan Selmy offered a half-smile in greeting. Robb inclined his head, feeling a swell of emotion. "My queen." Daenerys crossed the short distance, her eyes bright with warmth yet tinted by the burdens she carried. "Robb Stark, you've come far and you've come at the right time." A breath of laughter escaped her, quiet and tired. "I've been hearing reports of a dragon flying over the Trident, and I thought it had to be you." His voice turned gentle. "Yes. The North marches with me. We're ready to stand at your side, Daenerys." He sensed the hush in the tent, the onlookers measuring every word. Tyrion cleared his throat tactfully. "Perhaps the king would care for some mulled wine? And we can discuss the progress of our respective campaigns." Daenerys gestured for them all to gather around the table. "Yes. Let's do that. There's much to share." They spread out around the war map, which displayed the crownlands in detail. Small carvings of dragons, lions, roses, and suns indicated the positions of forces. Robb eyed the layout. Daenerys held territory east of King's Landing, with pockets of support from the Tyrells in the south, while the Lannisters gripped the capital and the roads west. Euron Greyjoy's ships blockaded the waters, making it difficult to bring in supplies from Dorne or the Narrow Sea. Meanwhile, the newly formed alliance with the Martells had been set back when some of their envoys were ambushed. The situation was delicate. Tyrion poured mulled wine into a wooden cup and handed it to Robb. "We've had small victories. The Crown's local levies are no match for the Unsullied, and our Dothraki outriders have sacked several supply caravans meant for King's Landing. But Cersei has turned to more insidious tactics, poisoning wells, burning fields behind us, anything to starve us out. The city is well provisioned, and we risk mass civilian casualties if we attempt a direct assault with dragons." Robb took a sip, the warmth spreading through his chest. "Then we must force her hand. Perhaps we can lure the Lannisters into open battle or cut off their supply lines from the west." Daenerys nodded. "That is the plan. But each day we delay, Euron Greyjoy tightens his hold on the bay, and Cersei has time to sow distrust among the lords who have yet to declare. Some might flock to the winning side at the last minute, but many fear the Lannisters' wrath." Ser Jorah cut in, his tone clipped. "Then let us burn the Red Keep and be done with it. A single pass with Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal would end Cersei's reign overnight." A silence fell. Daenerys lowered her gaze, troubled. "I will not be Queen of Ashes. I cannot slaughter a city to remove one tyrant. Otherwise, we become no different from the Lannisters." Robb set his cup aside. "Daenerys is right. The people deserve better than that. The only reason I support the use of dragons is to prevent more needless slaughter, not to cause it." Tyrion drummed his fingers on the table. "Well said. Burning King's Landing outright would earn us a victory built on terror, and we'd spend a generation trying to quell the resentment. However, if we can isolate Cersei from her allies, force the Lannisters to come out and fight on our terms, then we might minimize destruction." Robb glanced at the figurine representing the twins. "What of Walder Frey? If I strike at the twins, it might force the Lannisters to send troops to assist him. That could thin their defenses here and give you the opening to either take the city or set a siege." Daenerys exhaled. "It's a possibility. But do you have enough men to divide your forces again?" Robb hesitated. "Not truly. We number just over 4,000. I need at least half to stand with you if we're to break the Lannisters. But the Freys are cunning. The twins is a near impenetrable crossing. Laying siege to it with only 2,000 men would be risky at best." Tyrion lifted the lion-shaped figurine that represented the Lannister forces. "In that case, perhaps we keep all our combined strength here, near King's Landing, and send a smaller raiding force to the Freys. Enough to harass their lands, disrupt their lines. Walder Frey is old, vain, and easily angered. Provocation might draw him out." Robb's mouth tightened. "He's cunning in his cowardice, though. He won't risk an open field. Not after the Red Wedding showed him how lethal betrayal can be." At that, Daenerys reached over, covering Robb's hand with hers. The simple gesture spoke volumes to the onlookers, though she did not flinch under their gazes. "We will not allow the Freys to remain a festering wound. But first, we must focus on Cersei. If we topple her, the entire Lannister alliance crumbles. Walder Frey will stand alone against the North and the dragons." Robb met her gaze, a stirring in his chest at her resolve. "Agreed. Then we aim for a decisive blow here in the Crownlands." They spent hours refining strategies. They would feign weakness in one sector to lure the Lannister army out while the Tyrell and Martell forces harried them from the flank. Daenerys and Robb would hold their dragons in reserve, ready to strike at the crucial moment. Meanwhile, the Dothraki would sweep around to cut off any retreat toward the city's gates. It was a delicate plan, demanding impeccable timing and unity among many disparate forces. Night had long fallen by the time the council ended. Daenerys had quarters in the keep of the ruined castle near the pavilion, and she invited Robb to join her there for a private discussion. The other advisors dispersed, some with knowing looks or subtle curiosity. In the flickering torchlight, they crossed the muddy courtyard, stepping around broken stones and dislodged rubble until they reached the old keep's entrance. The keep's interior was only partly intact, a shell of crumbling walls and half-collapsed roofs. But Daenerys's retinue had made it livable, draping tapestries, placing braziers, laying fresh rushes on the floors. She led Robb to a chamber that served as her personal meeting space. A single narrow window let in the moonlight. Candles flickered on a heavy wooden table, and a small bedroll lay in one corner, a testament to the queen's willingness to endure hardship alongside her army. She turned to face him, crossing her arms. Her silver-gold hair was braided back, a few strands loose around her face. He could see the fatigue in her eyes, the weight of leadership that never fully subsided. Yet there was also warmth there, a spark that kindled whenever they were together. "I have so many questions, Robb Stark," she said softly. "How you've been, what you've seen. And I fear we have so little time for such luxuries." He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "We make time, or we lose ourselves in war." A breath shuddered in her chest. "You speak truly. Tell me, how fares Winterfell?" So he told her, in hushed tones, of the reconstruction of Lady Lyanna Mormont's fierce resolve, of the watchful hush that lingered in the corridors. He recounted Dolorous Ed's arrival and the plea from the Night's Watch, how the dead might be stirring beyond the wall. Daenerys's brow creased at the mention of the White Walkers. Though she had heard the tales, she had yet to see proof, and the war for the throne occupied her every waking thought. She sighed, stepping closer. "I want to help the North face these dangers. But if I do not win the Iron Throne first, I cannot rally the entire realm to meet the threat of the others. It seems we have to end one war before beginning the next. Gods, what a burden this is." He lowered his voice. "You don't bear it alone. You have me and the men of the North. Together we'll unite Westeros, one victory at a time." She gazed up at him, searching his face. "You have lost so much, your family, your home, your sense of safety. Yet you keep fighting. It humbles me." His chest tightened. "And you overcame exile, betrayals, and the weight of a legacy that both empowers and haunts you. If anyone understands resilience, it's you." He hesitated, then added, voice dropping, "I'm glad to stand by your side." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you, Robb Stark. For everything." Silence hung in the chamber, thick with an undercurrent of longing that neither of them had fully acknowledged until now. The flickering candlelight painted shadows on the cracked stone walls. Outside, the wind rustled the remnants of the castle's battlements. He felt the tension of war still thrumming in his veins, but in this fragile moment it faded, replaced by the soft gravity of shared trials. She lifted a hand to his cheek, and he leaned into the touch. Their breaths mingled in the hush. Then, gently, tentatively, their lips met in a kiss that carried the taste of salt and tears, hope and regret. It was brief, delicate, yet it ignited a warmth that defied the cold night beyond these walls. When they drew apart, her hand remained against his jaw. "We must win this war," she murmured, voice trembling. "We must." He nodded, threading his fingers through hers. "We will." They stayed that way for a long moment, savoring the closeness, until the sound of a distant horn shattered the silence. Both snapped to attention, hearts pounding. She pulled away, eyes flicking to the door. "That's the guard horn. Something's happened." They hurried back outside into the courtyard, meeting Tyrion and Ser Jorah mid-sprint. Soldiers converged, torches bobbing in the dark. The horn blared again. Above, dragons circled, agitated. A breathless messenger struggled through the throng, exclaiming that an enemy force had been spotted approaching from the west. Alarm rippled through the camp, for no one had expected the Lannisters to advance so boldly at night. Daenerys took command at once, barking orders for the Unsullied to ready defenses, for the Dothraki outriders to scout. Robb and Tyrion followed, heading toward the western perimeter. Dim shapes emerged on a distant ridge, torches flickering in the night. Through a spyglass, they made out banners of a golden lion on crimson, the sight that Daenerys had dreaded. The Lannisters were coming, perhaps emboldened by some new alliance or reinforcements. Daenerys signaled to her blood riders to prepare her mount. She turned to Robb. "Stay near me," she said, her voice taut. "We'll drive them back." Robb nodded, summoning the readiness of years spent at war. Word spread that the queen would fly Drogon into battle. Rhaegal and Viserion were also being brought forth, guided by Daenerys's blood riders with the help of Tyrion's cunning contraptions. The entire camp sparked to life in a flurry of armor and weapons, horses stamping and whinnying, men calling to one another in urgent voices. Fires glowed bright against the gloom, illuminating faces drawn with tension. Robb found Drogon near the edge of the camp where the dragon crouched, tail lashing. He swiftly tightened his harness, determined not to let the beast fly into the fray without him. If the Lannisters had arrived in force, they must plan something cunning, perhaps scorpions or other dragon-killing weapons, as rumored from King's Landing. He needed to be there to guard Daenerys if possible, though she would be riding Drogon's back herself. That left Robb to command from the ground or ride one of the other dragons if they permitted it. But only Drogon had truly accepted him. Rhaegal and Viserion were more aloof, more bonded to Daenerys alone. Suddenly, Daenerys herself appeared, a swirl of black and red cloak around her shoulders. She headed straight for Drogon, glancing at Robb with a conflicted expression. "It might be best you lead your men from the ground," she said. "Drogon can't bear two riders into heavy battle if we must breathe fire and maneuver swiftly." He swallowed, wanting to protest but understanding. She was the Dragon Queen, Drogon's first bond. "As you wish," he said softly. "But be careful." She offered a tense smile, then mounted Drogon with a practiced agility, buckling herself in. The dragon, sensing the adrenaline, roared and spread his wings wide. Robb stepped back as the wind gust nearly knocked him off balance. Then, with a thunderous beat, Drogon launched into the sky, carrying Daenerys high above the camp. On distant ridges, the glimmer of Lannister torches wavered. Robb dashed off to find his Northmen who were already assembling, swords and spears at the ready. He ordered them to mount up or form infantry lines near the open field. The air thrummed with the tension of impending combat. Overhead, Rhaegal and Viserion joined Drogon, three great shadows against the moonlit clouds. A hush fell across the assembled forces, broken only by the distant clang of armor. Then, as if drawn by an invisible current, the Lannister lines moved, descending the slope toward the Targaryen camp. Standard-bearers held tall lion banners and cavalry advanced with disciplined precision. It was a brazen night assault which suggested they felt confident or desperate. Robb signaled for the Dothraki to swoop around the flanks, for the Unsullied to form a shield wall at the center. Northmen would reinforce the left wing, while the Dornish and Tyrell troops guarded the right. He rode at the head of the northern cavalry, scanning for any sign of hidden scorpions or siege engines. Flames from the camp cast long shadows, lending the battlefield an otherworldly glow. Above, the dragons wheeled. Robb saw fire blossom in the sky as Daenerys gave the command and Drogon's roar shook the heavens. A jet of flame lit the darkness, striking the lead edge of the Lannister cavalry. Horses shrieked, men scattered in panic. Rhaegal and Viserion followed suit, unleashing torrents of flame on the flanks. But the Lannisters had prepared. Robb spotted war machines being hurriedly rolled into position, likely scorpions or large crossbows. The strings glinted in the firelight. He spurred his horse forward, calling to his bannermen. "Charge those siege weapons. Don't let them take aim at the dragons." Hooves thundered as the northern cavalry plunged into the fray. The ground became a chaos of shouts and steel. Robb hacked at a Lannister spearman who tried to bring him down, then parried a blow aimed at his flank. He guided his horse in a tight circle, searching for the scorpions. One was already being set up on a small rise. Lannister men in heavy armor cranked the mechanism, preparing to loose a massive bolt skyward. Robb bellowed a command, and a wedge of Northmen charged. Steel clashed, men screamed. The Scorpion's crew fell under sword and axe. The machine was tipped over and broken. Behind them, a second Scorpion fired. Robb heard a whistling in the air, saw a dark shape streak upward toward the dragons. It missed, but narrowly, passing between Viserion's wings. The dragon roared indignantly, banking away. Robb hissed in frustration. The Lannisters were cunning enough to have more such weapons. He had to disable them all before one found its mark. The night raged on in a blur of violence. Fire lit the battlefield in patches where dragon flame had scorched the ground. Smoke rose in thick plumes, obscuring vision. The Dothraki hooped and hollered, cutting through Lannister lines with savage grace. The Unsullied maintained a disciplined front, spears bristling, stepping over the fallen with cold efficiency. Northern soldiers fought doggedly, driven by memory of the Red Wedding and the torment inflicted by the Lannisters. Through it all, the dragons swooped, unleashing fury that turned men to ash and melted steel. Robb spotted a cluster of Lannister knights rallying around a tall figure in ornate armor. He steered toward them, cutting down a footman who lunged at his horse's flank. Drawing closer, he realized with a shock that the tall figure might be Jaime Lannister himself, the Kingslayer, golden hand glinting in the firelight. If so, capturing or slaying Jaime would be a major coup, but the man was well guarded. Robb pressed forward, rallying his bannermen to push through the Lannister line. Swords rang, horses screamed. He lost sight of Jaime in the melee. The swirl of battle carried them apart. From overhead came another thunderous roar. Drogon swooped in a fiery arc, blasting a row of enemy pikemen. But as the dragon rose, one of the scorpions fired again. A monstrous bolt soared upward. Robb's heart lurched as he saw it slice through the air. Drogon twisted, but not far enough. The bolt raked across his flank, drawing a spray of blood. He roared in agony. Instantly, Daenerys guided him out of range, retreating before the scorpion could reload. Robb's stomach clenched at the sight of the beast wounded. If another shot found its mark, she could be killed. Anger ignited in him, cold and furious. He spurred his horse toward the offending scorpion, a battered contraption manned by desperate Lannister soldiers. His men converged on it with savage determination, hacking down the defenders. Robb himself flung his spear at the scorpion's gunner, striking the man square in the chest. Then, dismounting, he heaved his weight against the scorpion, toppling it in a splinter of wood and twisted metal. Flames crackled nearby, casting dancing light on the carnage. He looked up to see Drogon circling, blood trailing from the wound, but still airborne. Daenerys's posture was tense, her hair whipping in the wind. Robb exhaled in relief that she at least was safe. The Lannister line began to crumble. Their cavalry was ravaged by dragon fire, their siege weapons destroyed. Fear spread among their ranks, and men started to break away, fleeing. The Dothraki pursued, cutting them down mercilessly. Tyrion's voice carried from somewhere in the distance, trying to call for order to avoid slaughtering those who would surrender. But in the chaos of a night battle, mercy was a rare coin. Robb wiped sweat and soot from his brow, scanning for any sign that the Lannisters might have a second wave waiting in ambush. Trumpets blared from within the Targaryen camp, but no new threat emerged. It seemed the Lannister foray had been an ill-fated attempt to catch Daenerys's forces unprepared. By the time dawn threatened to color the horizon, the Lannister army had been routed. Bodies littered the field and scattered fires still burned. Unsullied and Northmen formed search parties, gathering wounded allies and rounding up prisoners. In the aftermath, Robb found Daenerys dismounted near the edge of the battlefield. Drogon's side glistened with blood where the bolt had scored him. Missandei and a few Dothraki attempted to wash the wound with waterskins while Daenerys cradled the dragon's head, speaking soothing words in Valyrian. The great beast huffed, nostrils flaring, pained but defiant. Robb approached cautiously, not wishing to startle Drogon in his wounded state. Daenerys looked up, her face streaked with soot and tears. "They hurt him," she said, voice trembling with anger and worry. Robb gently laid a hand on Drogon's forelimb, feeling the tense muscle quiver beneath. "But he lives. Dragons are strong. He'll heal." She nodded, exhaling shakily. "I want these scorpions destroyed. All of them. We nearly lost." Her voice broke, and she steadied herself. "We have to end this war soon, Robb." He bowed his head, his own armor spattered with mud and blood. "We will. Tonight was a victory. The Lannisters threw themselves at us and failed. The word will spread. Now we press our advantage." She caressed Drogon's snout, tears escaping. "Yes. We must. For all our sakes." In the eastern sky, the first rays of sun broke through the gloom, revealing the battlefield in stark relief. Smoke curled from charred earth, crows already circling overhead. Soldiers murmured in subdued tones as they tended to the wounded and counted the dead. Robb's heart ached at the sight of the destruction, another chapter in the endless tragedy of war. But a small flicker of hope burned in him. They had prevailed, and the Lannisters had been dealt a sharp blow. With each victory, they drew closer to the day the realm might finally know peace. As Daenerys's men worked to treat Drogon's wound, Robb gathered what remained of his own forces, checking on their casualties. They had lost dozens, maybe hundreds, but the result was a clear triumph. He found Helmalin among the living, bruised but grinning grimly. They clasped forearms in relief. The northern host would need time to recover, to reorganize. Yet morale was high, fueled by dragon fire and their rightful king's leadership. An impromptu war council convened once the field was secured. Tyrion, Ser Jorah, Ser Barristan, Missandei, Robb, and a battered grey worm discussed the next steps. Jaime Lannister had eluded capture, though many of his knights had not. The question now was whether to march on King's Landing immediately, hoping that Cersei's morale had been shattered, or to bide their time and fully regroup. Daenerys, though shaken by Drogon's injury, argued for pressing forward sooner rather than later. Tyrion cautioned that King's Landing's walls were formidable and that Euron Greyjoy still menaced the coast. Robb weighed in, citing the advantage of momentum. If they let Cersei recover, she might fortify the city with more scorpions or attempt another cunning ploy. Finally, they reached a decision. They would move within striking distance of King's Landing but not attempt an immediate siege. Instead, they would blockade the roads, preventing supplies from entering. The battered Lannister armies would be forced behind the city's walls, while Daenerys and Robb planned their final blow. Raven messages would be sent to any lords who might yet waver, offering a chance to bend the knee or face the dragon. The aim was to force Cersei into negotiation or a desperate stand. That night, as the camp settled from the frenetic battle, Robb found himself alone with Daenerys once again. Drogon rested nearby, his wound salved and bandaged as best they could manage. The dragon lay curled, tail twitching occasionally, a quiet growl vibrating in his chest. Daenerys was silent, eyes on the horizon where the lights of King's Landing glimmered faintly beyond the rolling hills. "It's close," she murmured, her tone distant. "All I've dreamed of for so many years, the Iron Throne within reach." Robb stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "You'll have it. And you'll be a better ruler than any Lannister who ever claimed that seat." She let out a humorless laugh. "We still have so many battles ahead and winter is upon us. Sometimes I wonder, is it hubris to think I can unite this realm when it's been broken so many times before?" He studied her profile in the moonlight. "If it's hubris, then it's also hope. We fight not just to claim a throne, but to break a cycle of tyranny. That's worth the risk." She turned, meeting his gaze, uncertainty flickering in her violet eyes. "Is it selfish that I want you to remain by my side beyond this war?" The question caught him off guard, yet a swirl of warmth and longing answered. "You're not selfish. I want that too. Though I'll always have a duty to the north." She inclined her head. "And I'd never ask you to forsake it. Perhaps one day your people and mine won't be separate at all." He exhaled, imagining a future where the North was safe from both the Lannisters and the White Walkers and Daenerys Targaryen ruled a united Westeros in peace. It seemed a distant dream, but it was a dream worth fighting for. "I'd gladly kneel to a queen who ends my people's suffering," he said quietly, "but you've never asked me to kneel as anything but a partner." She lifted her chin. "You're a king in your own right, and I respect that. Our alliance stands on mutual trust, not subjugation." He nodded, letting the comfortable silence enfold them for a moment. Then, with a gentle pressure on her shoulder, he guided her toward her tent so she could rest. The war would wait for neither of them, and dawn came quickly. Yet as they parted for the night, something unspoken and comforting lingered, a sense that they had found not just an ally, but a bond that transcended crowns and banners. In the days that followed, the combined Targaryen and Northern forces pressed closer to King's Landing. The city's great walls loomed, forbidding and ancient, a challenge to any besieging army. Columns of Unsullied and ranks of Northmen established fortified positions on the main roads in and out of the capital. The Dothraki scoured the surrounding countryside, removing any Lannister outposts. Daenerys, recovering from the shock of Drogon's injury, used her dragons more sparingly but still soared above the city at times, a grim reminder of the power that could be unleashed if Cersei refused to yield. And refuse she did. Ravens from the Red Keep arrived with scornful messages, proclaiming Daenerys Targaryen a foreign invader and Robb Stark a traitor who had risen from the grave like a white. Cersei's words were barbed, mocking their alliance. She promised that King's Landing would never bow to a barbaric horde and a turncloak wolf. She threatened to burn the city herself if forced to surrender. Tyrion, reading those letters, cursed softly under his breath, recognizing the madness that gripped his sister. She would burn them all if it meant denying Daenerys the throne. Time was not on their side. Winter's grip tightened and the fields around King's Landing withered under frost. Supplies dwindled while Euron Greyjoy's fleet harassed any ships carrying provisions or reinforcements. Robb's men grew restless, longing for a decisive clash. Yet to storm King's Landing outright risked the lives of thousands of innocents trapped behind its walls. Daenerys refused to be the Queen of Ashes. A partial breakthrough came when word reached them that a portion of the City Watch, disillusioned with Cersei's rule, might open a gate if the right terms were offered. Tyrion insisted on caution. Cersei had proven she could set traps. Daenerys agreed but sent covert emissaries to explore the possibility. While they awaited a reply, they endured the tense stalemate, the lines around the city never slackening. Every evening, Robb met with Daenerys, Tyrion, and the other advisors, wrestling with the moral quandary of how to end the siege without a wholesale massacre. The conversations often stretched late into the night, leaving Robb exhausted and haunted by memories of previous battles. Sometimes after the councils, Daenerys and Robb would walk the perimeter together, exchanging quiet reflections on war and the burdens of leadership. Those moments of closeness were fleeting glimmers in the dark. At last, after nearly 2 weeks of stalemate, a battered Lannister courier staggered into their camp under a flag of truce. He demanded to speak with the Queen and King personally. Robb, Daenerys, and Tyrion emerged to meet him by a brazier near the edge of the encampment. Surrounded by unsullied guards, the courier, eyes bloodshot from fatigue, handed over a sealed letter. Daenerys broke the seal and read, her expression darkening with each line. She passed it to Robb. The letter was from Jaime Lannister, evidently writing without Cersei's knowledge. He proposed a meeting beyond the city walls near the Dragon Pit to discuss a truce or a compromise. The letter hinted at potential cooperation, especially if he could ensure that Cersei was removed from power before she destroyed the city. Tyrion sucked in a sharp breath, recognizing Jaime's handwriting, his brother's style of reasoning. The letter ended with a stark warning that Cersei had become more paranoid than ever and might be preparing a catastrophic last resort if threatened with defeat. Tyrion stared at the flickering fire. It could be a trap. My sister has used Jaime as a lure before. Robb weighed the possibilities. Or it could be genuine. If Jaime has turned against Cersei, it might be our best chance to avoid a bloodbath. Daenerys looked torn. I won't risk being betrayed again. If we agree to meet, it must be on our terms with our security. Drogon, the Unsullied, a full escort. No hidden scorpions. They finally resolved to accept the meeting but demanded a neutral location. The Dragon Pit, an ancient ruin on the Hill of Rhaenys, would serve with an equal number of men from both sides. Tyrion drafted a careful reply, stating that any sign of treachery would unleash the dragons on King's Landing. Robb felt a mix of dread and hope. Jaime Lannister had once been his prisoner before the Red Wedding shattered everything. If Jaime truly sought to end Cersei's reign, it might be the final piece needed to claim the throne without incinerating the city. But he also recalled the depth of Jaime's devotion to his sister. How far would the Kingslayer go in betraying her? A few days later, they prepared to ride for the Dragon Pit. Daenerys, wearing black-scaled armor, mounted Drogon. Robb rode at her side on horseback, clad in stark armor with a fur-trimmed cloak. Tyrion, Ser Barristan, Missandei, and a small contingent followed. The Unsullied formed a protective perimeter while the dragons circled overhead. Across the ruined expanse of King's Landing's outskirts, they saw Lannister colors flying, a small group approaching. The tension was suffocating. They reached the broken arches of the Dragon Pit. The once grand dome was now collapsed, a mere skeleton of ancient Targaryen glory. Half-buried dragon skulls littered the area, a grim reminder of past might. Drogon landed heavily on a section of stone that could bear his weight, snorting as if offended by the decay. Robb dismounted. Dust swirled around their feet. Moments later, Jaime Lannister emerged from the shadows, flanked by a handful of gold-cloaked guards. He wore a breastplate gilded with the lion's head, and his golden hand caught the sunlight, gleaming in stark contrast to the desolation around them. He inclined his head to Daenerys. Your Grace. King Robb Stark. Tyrion stepped forward, a swirl of emotion on his face. Brother. Jaime's gaze flicked to Tyrion. It's good to see you alive, little brother. Then, turning to Daenerys, he extended his flesh hand in a gesture of uncertain peace. I come unarmed, except for this decoration. He raised the golden hand in a rhyme motion. Daenerys studied him with cool poise. State your case, Ser Jaime. Jaime exhaled. My sister, she's lost her reason. She has caches of wildfire hidden throughout the city. If you storm the gates, she'll ignite them all and burn King's Landing to ash. Tens of thousands will die. She's grown more unstable with each passing day, haunted by prophecies of betrayal. I've tried to dissuade her. She won't listen. Robb's jaw clenched. Wildfire. He recalled how King Aerys had threatened to burn the city. Now Cersei Lannister threatened the same. The cycle repeated unless they found a way to break it. And what do you propose, Jaime? You want us to let her rule unchallenged while she readies her bombs? Jaime shook his head. No. The realm can't afford another mad tyrant. I'm prepared to remove her. If you'll promise to spare the city, give me the chance to stop her from lighting the wildfire. Then surrender the Red Keep if I open the gates from within. The City Watch might follow me over Cersei if they believe the alternative is certain death." A stunned silence settled. Tyrion stared in disbelief, pain etched on his features. Daenerys's expression hardened. "You speak of killing your own sister." Jaime closed his eyes. "I speak of saving thousands of innocent lives from a monstrous fate. I killed the Mad King for the same reason. I believed I could guide Cersei to be better. I was wrong." Daenerys stepped forward, Drogon rumbling behind her. "And what do you want in return?" Jaime's mouth tightened. "Amnesty for any Lannister soldiers who surrender peacefully, a promise that the city won't be torched. Let House Lannister stand trial if you must, but don't erase it from history. And allow me to live once this is done." Robb studied Jaime's lined face, the hollow resignation in his eyes. Tyrion's voice was hushed. "He means it, Your Grace. I know him. If Jaime has come to this, it's because there's no other way." Daenerys turned to Robb, searching his gaze. The fate of a city hung in the balance. Robb slowly nodded. "If there's a chance to save those lives, I say we take it. Better than watching King's Landing burn." Daenerys regarded Jaime one last time, her voice carrying the weight of a queen. "Very well, Kingslayer. I accept your offer on the condition that if you fail, if you betray us, or if Cersei sets off the wildfire, I will unleash my dragons without mercy. Do you understand?" Jaime bowed his head. "I do." She drew a breath, chest rising. "Then go. We'll hold our forces. But do not tarry long. The next time we come, it will be with Dragonfire." Jaime glanced at Tyrion, the faintest of smiles tugging at his lips. "I hope this ends better than I deserve." With that, he turned and left, the gold cloaks ushering him back toward the city. Daenerys, Robb, Tyrion, and their retinue exchanged anxious looks, each weighed down by the enormity of what they had just consented to. If Jaime spoke true, then a final confrontation loomed, one that might decide the fate of King's Landing without a bloodbath, or might plunge it into the very flames they hoped to avoid. They returned to their lines, hearts pounding. Hours crawled by, then a day, then two. Each sunrise brought fresh tension. Robb hardly slept, haunted by nightmares of wildfire consuming the city. Daenerys's face grew ever more drawn, her posture rigid with resolve. Tyrion paced incessantly, muttering darkly about how this had to succeed. Meanwhile, the armies on both sides remained in uneasy stalemate. Above, the skies darkened with thick clouds, hinting at a looming winter storm. The stage was set, but no one knew how the final act would unfold. On the third day after Jaime's departure, Tyrion burst into Daenerys's command tent, where Robb, Grey Worm, and a handful of Northmen were assembled. The dwarf's eyes gleamed with an urgent hope. "Word from the city whispers that Jaime has secured part of the City Watch. We might have an opening." Within the hour, ravens arrived from within King's Landing, carried by a rebel watchman loyal to Jaime. The message was brief: a certain gate would be unbarred at midnight, and Cersei's supporters in the City Watch had been neutralized. The wildfire caches were under Jaime's control, or so the letter claimed. Jaime asked them to come swiftly but quietly to avoid spooking Cersei into lighting the city ablaze before he could act. The War Council erupted into urgent debate. Could they trust this message? Was it another trap? In the end, with so much at stake, Daenerys decided they had to try. Better to risk betrayal than guarantee a slaughter by inaction. The plan took shape quickly. An elite force of Unsullied and Northmen would creep to the designated gate at midnight, supported by a small group of Dothraki outriders. Tyrion would come along, hoping to help negotiate any last-minute obstacles. Daenerys and Robb would remain just outside the walls with the dragons ready to strike if needed. Night fell, cold and dark, with a bitter wind moaning across the fields. The hush was so profound that every footstep sounded magnified. Daenerys stood near Drogon, gloved hands gripping the reins that secured his harness. She wore a grim expression under a hood trimmed in fur. Robb waited beside her, sword belted at his hip, scanning the distant walls for any sign of movement. The rest of the army remained back, prepared to rush in if the gate opened or if chaos erupted. Hours crawled past. Then, faintly, a light flickered atop the city walls once, twice, thrice. The signal. Tyrion and Grey Worm led the Unsullied forward. A column of Northmen followed in eerie silence, cloaks blending with the shadows. Robb and Daenerys advanced more slowly, keeping the dragons a few hundred yards behind. If the plan succeeded, they would slip into King's Landing with minimal resistance. If it failed, the city might explode in wildfire. Robb's nerves were taut as bowstrings. He glanced at Daenerys. She nodded, face pale but steady. In the distance, the gate groaned. A faint scraping of bars being lifted. The Unsullied poured through. No alarm sounded yet. Overhead, Regal and Viserion circled, scanning the battlements. Drogon let out a low growl and Daenerys placed a hand on his flank. Suddenly, a shout echoed from within. Torchlight flared behind the gate, followed by the clash of steel. The plan had not gone perfectly. Robb cursed under his breath, urging Daenerys to stay behind as he advanced on foot, a small group of Northmen at his heels. Inside, by the glow of scattered torches, they found Unsullied locked in combat with a group of Lannister loyalists. The corridor was cramped, the air thick with tension. Tyrion pressed himself against a wall, trying to avoid stray blades. Grey Worm barked an order, and the Unsullied surged, overwhelming the loyalists with disciplined ferocity. Robb recognized one of the enemy officers, a gold cloak with fear etched on his face. They parted with curses or screams as the Unsullied forced them to yield. Beyond that, the gatehouse corridor opened onto a courtyard. More gold cloaks ran, some tossing down their weapons in surrender. The watchers on the walls must have been neutralized, or else they would be raining arrows by now. Could Jaime have truly succeeded? Robb stepped into the courtyard, scanning for any sign of a larger ambush. Buildings loomed around them, windows dark, some boarded up. The stench of sewage and old fires lingered in the cramped city air. A few civilians peered from doorways, eyes wide with fear. No one attacked, no alarm bells rang. It was as though the city was half asleep, ignorant of the drama unfolding at the gates. Daenerys slipped through behind Robb, flanked by Missandei and a handful of Unsullied. Her presence was electrifying. The soldiers who recognized her stared in awe or terror. She lifted a hand, gesturing for them to press onward deeper into King's Landing. Grey Worm led the vanguard, systematically disarming any pockets of resistance. Tyrion, looking pale, scuttled near Robb, muttering that they should find Jaime quickly before Cersei realized what was happening. As if on cue, a figure emerged from a side street, Jaime Lannister, covered in dust, sweat staining the collar of his cloak. He spotted Tyrion, relief flooding his features. "We've seized the key caches of Wildfire," he said, breath ragged. "She's in the Red Keep. She suspects nothing yet. We must hurry." Daenerys fixed Jaime with a piercing gaze. "You truly did it, then?" He nodded, eyes haunted. "I made sure she couldn't ignite the wildfire. But the hardest part remains." Her voice dropped. "You mean confronting her?" Jaime's face twisted with pain. "Yes. We must reach her before she can rally any loyal men. Time is short." Without another word, they pushed on, the Unsullied forming a tight cordon around Daenerys, Robb, and Jaime. The Northmen fanned out to secure the surrounding streets and reassure the frightened citizens that the city was not under attack if possible. Muted chaos echoed in the distance, but it was far from the wholesale battle Robb had envisioned. A hush fell across King's Landing as if the city itself held its breath. Within minutes, they reached the base of the hill leading to the Red Keep. Doors were flung open or barricaded, but few guards stood in their way. Most had deserted or been persuaded by Jaime's infiltration. At the gate of the Red Keep's outer wall, a handful of lion-helmeted knights blocked their path. Jaime stepped forward, gold hand raised, trying to reason with them. One of them spat vile curses at him for betraying the queen. Steel was drawn and a brief melee erupted. The Unsullied dispatched the knights with ruthless efficiency. The battered gate was forced open. They stormed into the courtyard of the Red Keep, boots echoing off stone. The tension was suffocating. Shadows stretched from the high walls in the moonlight. Far above, flames flickered in the windows of Maegor's Holdfast. That was where Cersei would be. Jaime led the way, each step more hesitant, as though he expected his sister to appear at any moment. Robb followed, sword in hand, scanning for archers or hidden traps. Daenerys walked just behind him, chin high, nerves steeled. Suddenly, a shrill scream tore through the courtyard. A regal figure burst from a side passage, Cersei Lannister, her gold hair disheveled, eyes wild with panic. She was flanked by Qyburn and 2 Kingsguard knights. Qyburn clutched a crossbow, trembling. The knights raised their swords at once. Cersei's gaze raked over the intruders, settling on Jaime with astonished betrayal. You dare bring them here?" Jaime advanced, pain contorting his features. "Cersei, it's over. Surrender, or you'll doom the city." She laughed, a hysterical sound. "The city is mine, Jaime. I am the queen. I'll burn it all before I let that usurper or that wolf." Her eyes flicked to Daenerys and Robb with venom. "Take my throne." Daenerys stepped forward, voice resonant. "I am no usurper. I am Daenerys Stormborn, rightful heir of the 7 kingdoms, breaker of chains. You will stand down or face the consequences." Cersei's lips curled in a sneer. "You'll never take me alive." Robb saw the moment Qyburn moved to raise the crossbow. Instinct took over. He lunged, batting the weapon aside with his sword. The bolt fired wildly, clattering against stone. One of the Kingsguard knights rushed at Daenerys, but Grey Worm intervened, his spear lancing the knight through the torso. The second knight charged Jaime, screaming curses. Jaime parried awkwardly with his left hand, grimacing as blade met blade. They traded furious blows in the courtyard. Robb pivoted, engaged Qyburn, who scrabbled for a dagger. Robb disarmed him with a swift kick, sending the old man sprawling. Cersei tried to flee, but Daenerys caught her wrist, yanking her back. The Queen of Kings' Landing hissed like a trapped viper, nails raking. Daenerys held her fast. For a heartbeat, Robb feared Cersei might have a hidden dagger or a wildfire spark. Jaime overcame the second Kingsguard, slashing him across the thigh and knocking him unconscious. Then he whirled to see Cersei pinned by Daenerys' grip, tears of rage streaming down her cheeks. "It's over," Jaime gasped, chest heaving. "You're beaten. Don't do anything foolish." Cersei glared, trembling with pure hatred. Her voice cracked. "Traitor. Coward. My beloved brother, you'd see our house fall." "Our house fell the moment you embraced madness," Jaime said, pain in every word. Cersei spat at him, then turned her glare to Daenerys and Robb. "You think you've won? The Iron Throne, take it then. See how you like the burden? The realm is a pit of vipers. You'll tear each other apart soon enough." Daenerys' voice was steady, though her eyes were haunted. "I'll not be a queen of ash. We'll rebuild what your cruelty destroyed." Cersei laughed bitterly, a hollow, taunting sound. "Go on then. Rebuild your shining new world until the next war burns it down. Until the wolves and dragons turn on each other. That's all this realm knows." Robb felt a chill. He stepped closer, sword still in hand, though not raised. "You're done hurting people." Cersei's eyes bored into him, unhinged. "You died once, Stark, and came back to torment me. Well, enjoy your revenge." She threw her head back in bitter laughter. "Jaime, you fool. You worthless traitor." Jaime took a shaky breath, stepping forward. His voice dropped to a pleading murmur. "Enough, Cersei. Enough." He drew a dagger, gently, as if cradling a wounded animal. It seemed for a moment he might strike her down. But instead, he turned the blade hilt first to Daenerys. "She surrenders," he said, tears lining his face. "End this. Spare the city. Let the realm see justice done through a trial, not another massacre." Cersei struggled against Daenerys' grip but lacked the strength to break free. The courtyard echoed with tension. Daenerys hesitated, eyes flicking to Robb, then to the flickering torches around them. Finally, she nodded. "Take her prisoner. We will have a formal trial. Let all Westeros bear witness." Grey Worm and a pair of unsullied seized Cersei, wrenching her arms behind her back. She shrieked in fury, her dignity stripped away. Qyburn, trembling, was also taken into custody. Jaime dropped to his knees, golden hand pressed to the ground. Tyrion approached, uncertain, resting a hand on his brother's shoulder. The tension of years weighed between them. Jaime closed his eyes. Robb looked at Daenerys. She stood there, shoulders rigid, hair disheveled, breathing hard. In that moment, the enormity of their victory sank in. King's Landing had fallen without the city burning, thanks to Jaime's desperate betrayal of his sister. The war was not entirely over. Euron Greyjoy still harried the seas, the Freys still held the twins, and the White Walkers threatened the north. But the Lannisters' stranglehold on the Iron Throne had been broken. In the streets below, rumors spread like wildfire, only this time it was a wildfire of relief rather than destruction. The people soon learned that Queen Cersei was captured, that the Dragon Queen had taken the Red Keep without a massacre. Daylight crept over the horizon, and as the sun rose, bells began to toll from the city's steps. Whether in mourning or celebration, no one could quite say. But they rang, and King's Landing awakened to a new reality. Amid the swirling confusion, Daenerys turned to Robb. Their gazes met, a silent exchange of triumph and fatigue. She looked close to collapsing, the adrenaline draining away. He stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. She leaned into him for a moment, allowing herself a breath of solace. "It's done," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "No more Lannister tyranny. The Iron Throne is ours." He nodded, chest tight with the enormity of it. "We've taken the city. But now we must hold it. We must rule wisely, or all this was for naught." She nodded, eyes shining. "Together, then?" "Together," he promised. Outside, the bells tolled louder, echoing over a city on the cusp of transformation. They were not the bells of devastation, but of a new dawn. The wolf and the dragon had united, toppling the might of the Lannisters without bathing King's Landing in dragonfire. Yet Robb knew the challenges that lay ahead, restoring peace, bringing the realm together, facing the looming winter and the threat beyond the wall. Victory here was but one step in a longer journey. But for this moment, in the courtyard of the Red Keep, with the dawn light streaming through the broken ramparts, Robb allowed himself a glimmer of hope. The nightmares of the Red Wedding, the betrayal of the Boltons and the Freys, the cruelty of the Lannisters, all of it led to this fragile triumph. The taste of it, tinged with the bitterness of war, was a testament to the resilience of those who fought for a better realm. He turned his face up to the rising sun, inhaling the smoky air, and remembered his father's words. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Their pack, extended now to include a dragon queen and her followers, still had much to face. But they would face it together, forging a future that might, for once, shine with something more lasting than the flicker of wildfire and the clash of steel.